All righty. Hey, let's have a hangout tonight. I know it's been a while since we had like a little late night hangout. And I had a gentleman been messaging me on email, very polite, Darkweb MasterD, I believe that is the pseudonym he goes by, and he believes that he can assail my atheist semantic collapse argument. And so I was like, okay, hey, give it a listen. He hasn't told me any details whatsoever of his counter argument or his refutation of it, so I'm going in completely blind, the way I like it. But I will tell you, Dark, you got some pushback already. Kimomaki in the live chat says, I don't think the semantic collapse deal is assailable. If there's a misunderstanding, it would be a trivial semantic misreading of the argument. So, anyways, Dark. So, who are you and what you got for me? Because I haven't talked to you before.
Hell, who am I? That's a tough question.
Who are any of us really? A lot of
I'm a dude.
Existential
I'm a dude
question.
that argues on the internet.
All right, no, well, got a few of those. They do exist. Yes, so Flamo, I have no intro music. I know. Every time I tried to put music on it, it had content ID match, and I was like, the hell with this. All right, so let's dive into this. I obviously assumed you read my argument. Where do you want to start to see any issues with it?
I just want to make sure I got a couple basic things correct. So, actually, I think I have OBS up here. You see that?
Yes, matter of fact, that's exactly what I have on the screen right now. Believe it or not, I actually have that. Well, I have the more filled out version, but yes, that's what I have. If you look on the outside video feed, I have it underneath where we are positioned. If you're watching the video, so yes, I put that on the screen. So yes, I am familiar with that. That looks very familiar. That's from my paper.
Okay, and I the basic of your argument, correct me if I'm wrong, is that BSG is how the people that define things in such a way that causes collapse. BSG to them is theism, and not BSG is atheism.
Right? Well, I don't know what you mean by what they do. The way I'm doing it, as far as like the semantic terms, is what is normally describes something, right? These are not prescriptive definitions. You don't have to even accept the definitions, and the logic still flows. Because the descriptions are kind of irrelevant to the actual logic itself. But what do we describe somebody who believes there's a God? Well, typically the name for that is what we go by as theist, right? Or theism. And that's all encompassing. It's very generalized, right? It really doesn't tell much if to people that say, yeah, I'm a theist, I believe in God. Okay. It helps to ask, well, are you Christian? Are you Muslim? Are you Jewish? That gets a little more nuance, right? But if you're just asking, hey, what's your position on the ontological status of God? Those who believe God exists, we can call theist. I mean, I think that's perfectly reasonable to call that position, right? A theist, would you not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then in my paper, the people that believe that God doesn't exist, I don't know what else you would call them, but atheist. What else? I mean, I've heard some people try to use anti-theist, but anti-theist already has applications in literature as an axiological position. So I don't know why anybody would use anti-theism to describe the position of believing there's no God. It makes no sense. They haven't convinced me there's a reason to do that when that word already has a deep understanding of usages in philosophy already. Why change? Why add another usage to it? That just doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Okay, and the criticism is people that try to call no belief in God atheism, that's the defining characteristic.
Yeah, I think you're on the right track. Yeah, they're trying to call what normally would be understood as weak atheism just as atheism.
Okay, so what I would, well, I guess that's probably actually better for me to show this one. Here are the three positions. I highlighted them that people can have.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Everyone has to have two on the square of opposition.
Everybody has to have two out of those three, if and only if they are aware of the proposition. And sincerity, and they're rational. Again, there are some assumptions I've made in my paper. One, that is a rational agent, right? Because you can have conflicting beliefs, right? And two, that actually three, rational agent, sincerity, which I put in my paper. Sincerity basically means what you believe, what you assert, you believe, right? You don't assert, assert things and not believe it, like be falsities. And then also, you have to assume that that the person has understanding of the proposition, because you can get into the whole what's called implicit explicit that Smith used, which I think is really silly. But in order for these three things to be the case, you have to be aware of the proposition. Innocent doesn't fall into any of these. One who does not ever heard the proposition would not fall into any one of these three. I did try to do logic to incorporate an innocent. I had to use first or order logic to do it, and it got really complicated really fast, and I just kind of gave up.
Well, I have that's for later. I have another diagram made by someone that I'm pretty sure you don't like, but it's just a diagram.
Don't tell me who it's from. I'm only going by the information. But you by the way, you have a background in logic?
No, not really.
Okay,
not really.
Philosophy? Anything? Just out of curiosity.
Well, vaguely. It's technically I'm an economist, but
most of my
background.
That's magic, dude. That's magic.
But most of my background's in like anthropology. It's sort of the study of value and throughout human history. But it's like historical economy.
So not like Keynesian sublime demand curves.
No, not really. Actually, very little math. Very little. Because
that stuff's magic. I swear to God, it just. Yeah. I had to take microeconomics, and that was the hardest subject I ever took in my life.
That's because some of it's out of thin air.
I didn't know what the hell, dude. I'm not even joking. I did not understand. I'm decent at understanding stuff when I go to school. I study hard. I do the work. I put in the time. I really tried to grasp macroeconomics and supply demand curves and the calculus involved, because it's differential equations. I was so utterly lost. I still got to be in the class, but it was just, I swear to God, just regurgitation. I didn't understand any of it.
Yeah. So, but long story short, there's a heavy overlap in axology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, I got you, because it's really value, sure.
Yeah, so I mean, but everything else is sort of just as I come across it or as I learn it.
Okay.
When I need it.
I like this already. This is going good. Okay. Better than any so far. They've challenged it.
Oh, I'm sure. You'll star. For me, I guess. Oh, but yeah, I was assuming you meant rational. I mean, it's a side note. I think I would include innocent people on here, just on the bottom, like lumped into the bottom position. But they're not. It's not so much that they're included; it's that they're not explicitly excluded.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying. The reason, logically, they would be at the bottom, but because it would have to use more of an Euler diagram to explain an innocent, because the innocent, even though logically they fall into the bottom, to be in the bottom, you have to willfully suspend judgment, right? You really have to say, look, I hold neither position. And there's reasons why I hold neither positions, because I looked at the propositions and this is what I ended up settling on. An innocent doesn't do that. So yes, logically, innocence would be on the bottom, but you'd have to use like I said, like an Euler diagram rather than the Venn diagram or square of opposition, and really capture that nuance. But logically, yeah, I mean, the innocence would fall on the bottom. Okay.
Yeah, I was explaining this to someone yesterday, in fact, that technically innocents have those two positions, but the defining characteristic for them isn't there.
Ren the Archangel says, I'm a theoretical economist in training. I can't get over how Steve said Keynesian's names. I don't, because I hated the subject. Keynesian?
Either one.
How else you want to say it? I mean, this was like 25 years ago, too. Yeah. I thought it was Keynesian. Is it Keynesian or Keynesian?
Oh, you mean the economist?
Yeah.
Kinsey.
Yeah, Kinsey. But when you're looking at the Kinsey, when you say something like Keynesian graph, is it Keynesian or?
Yeah.
Okay, Keynesian.
It's either way. I hear it both.
Yeah, I have too. So I mean,
I hear it both from two people giving a lecture at the same time.
So it's not just me going to lose my mind, because again, it was 25 years ago. But either way, like I said, I didn't understand it. The least I care about is understanding his magic. I mean, it's magic. It's just, I don't know how else to describe it. The math is weird, but go ahead.
But anyway, back to the basics of it now. I think the folly is, the main folly is they're defining atheism as the bottom right and making that the definitive.
Yeah, because they're prescribing
feature.
it, right? They're actually prescribing it. They're saying anybody who has this particular property of non-belief is an atheist. And then they're funny is because they're saying, oh, Steve's the prescriptivist. Steve's telling people what positions there are. No, I've been the one arguing against that, saying just because you meet certain criteria or properties for a description doesn't mean it necessitates you are that item. That's why the thing that describes sets will describe the members of the set, but just because you have that certain property doesn't mean you have to be in that set. You know, it just seems weird that atheists do it that way, where they're like, oh, well, if you do not have a God belief, you must be an atheist. There's no logical entailment for that. None. I mean, only if you, obviously, if you have only theists and atheists, and then in their paradigm, then sure. But that's like, who cares? You're just creating a false dilemma and saying, well, that you only have two logical options, even though there are multiple other options if you don't use their schema. That make sense? Yeah, because I just reject their schema, sure.
But if they're defining it this way, technically, the belief that there is no God isn't a defining characteristic of what an atheist is.
It'd be the contradiction of theism, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But they're an atheist because the bottom right is implied from the top right.
They would be an atheist because there's a contradiction of the belief of theism. In their case, what they say makes atheism is that merely not having a God belief, because there is a dichotomy between having a belief God exists and not having a belief that God exists. And they say, okay, anybody who holds belief God exists is a theist, and then they just dishonestly say anybody who doesn't hold the belief is an atheist, and that comes out of nowhere. There's no, I think you at least may agree. There's no philosophical reasons for that. That's just something they say that they want. There's no logical or metaphysical entailment for that whatsoever.
Oh, I mean, yeah, it's basically it's wherever anyone wants to put the goalpost.
Sure, yeah, no, I'm on board with that, and I agree with that. Which, by the way, I assume you're atheist.
I've gotten real messy. I've kind of started just identifying myself as all three, and I say it's based on what the definition of the word God is to you.
Yeah, but that's just like, well, I don't want to get into that. That's going to be confusing.
Yeah, it's messy. We can do it after.
Go ahead. Continue. Yeah, maybe.
So they wouldn't label, if they were working on this chart, they wouldn't label the belief that there is no God as atheism.
No, but
they would label that like strong.
Right. Well, why? That's still just atheist, though. I mean, look, if I said I believe there's no God, people would be like, okay, you're an atheist, right?
Well, yeah, but an atheist can have, according to them, can have a belief that there is.
Right, but what do we call people
that have? What makes them an atheist?
Right, because what I'm saying is they make a specific condition to be atheist, right? Which is the non-belief rather than having the belief. Theist, the specific condition that's both necessary and sufficient is that they believe there's a God, right? It's a necessary condition that they believe God exists. It's a sufficient condition that they believe God exists. It's a necessary condition that they do not believe that God does not exist. But it's not a sufficient condition that they do not believe that God does not exist. So atheism would be the same thing. I mean, if that's how it is for theism, it would be just a mirror of atheism. An atheist would be somebody who believes there's no God. That's a sufficient condition and necessary. And a person who doesn't believe that God does exist is merely unnecessary, but not sufficient. That's how it would have to be. Because again, somebody says, I believe there's no God. What else are you going to call them? What do you want to call them?
Yeah, they would say that they're an atheist, but that's not what makes them an atheist.
Well, they would say that the non-belief makes an atheist, and my argument is that doesn't make any sense. That's like saying non-belief of God does not exist is what makes a theist. What makes a theist is the belief, and to be consistent, an atheist has to be somebody. If you wanted to have like consistency, to have some kind of Occam razors kind of stuff, like law of parsimony, right? To be parsimonious. If theism is a belief, then atheism also has to be belief, right? You can't just say one is a non-belief, because theism is the non-belief of the proposition of atheism. I mean, what do you call the proposition God does not exist? What?
But saying they're violating a rule that you want to hold to isn't saying that they're semantically collapsing.
Sure, no, I agree with you. No, yeah, that doesn't get you semantic collapse. I agree there. It's just non-parsimonious,
right? And I'll give you that the definition that they're picking, right, is just left up to their feelings on the situation.
Yeah, it's arbitrary.
Right.
Yeah, I've said that the other night when I said, I can say, look, do you want to have chicken or fish for dinner? You don't want chicken, you're going to have fish. Okay, it's arbitrary that I picked those, and that's all I have. Then it's by necessity, if you don't pick one, you got to have the other. But we all know there's other types of meats out there, right? And so you're limiting in scope what a person can do, really, because you're literally being arbitrary and saying, I just limiting your choices to fish and chicken, even though we know there's a multitude of other things you can eat. Mhm.
But what I'm trying to get at here is if the two labeled positions on the chart I'm showing are the definitions they're using,
Mm-hmm.
then the lack of belief that there's no God and the belief that there is a God has no bearing on the definition.
Well,
They
again,
they wouldn't call you something solely based on
but
that.
my argument is that these definitions do not prescribe; they describe. In other words, you cannot make a prescription from a description. You cannot say because it has these traits, it must be this. This the opposite is this
I mean, I think
describes
it
an
can.
object. Yeah,
I
that's
think it can,
prescriptivism.
and it depends on the
All
authority
right, but that's
and the language.
mathematics. It could be that way. Logic maybe can be that way. Sure, we prescribe, certain things in mathematics. If you have this, if you have a three-sided, two-dimensional object with a single 90-degree right angle, right? Or you define a right triangle or something like that. Sure, you could mathematically define something, but words do not have definitions to them, right? A word where dictionary just prescribes words. They all describe how they're uses. They're not prescriptive. There may have been one or twice over the years,
Yeah,
but
but this definition isn't being enforced by a dictionary. This definition is being enforced by a culture. The culture is prescribing it.
yeah, no, I absolutely. I'm glad you agree, though. New atheism prescribes this. They're not just. They're claiming I'm a prescriptivist when I'm the opposite. I've been saying for years I'm a descriptivist, and this is why. I think words are described by something. They're the opposite. They're saying no. A word is prescribed by definition by saying if the definition is does not believe God exists, then anybody who fits that definition is an atheist. That's completely wrong to me. No dictionary does that any longer.
Well, unless you're French.
Yeah. I mean, I'm talking about. There's what's synchronic and diachronic usage. Synchronic usage in America, most of the dictionaries are just going to be sensu lato, very generalized. But in other cultures, that might not be the case, right? There are prescriptive languages out there, but in America, that's not generally how it works.
And prescriptions in English tend to be enforced by niche communities.
Yeah, by social things rather than because we have figured out a long time ago that words do not change by demand. That's a lot of what I've talked about with woke culture before. They want people to use certain words a certain way. You cannot enforce word usage. It never works out well for society.
Yeah, it can be done. It never works out well.
Mm-hmm.
But
I believe that.
There's like an in between, like I would say, like a campaigning. You could change the usage and expand the culture, but that's still sort of outside the argument.
Yeah, but that's real quick. That's by usage, though. I mean, the change of words come about by using the word a certain way, and they'll say, okay, this word is now being used in this particular culture to represent or connote this particular meaning, right? That's what the dictionary is telling you.
Yeah, and the prescription comes along when there is a culture and a community, and they're choosing whether to include you or ostracize you.
Yes, and in that community, they could prescribe their usages and use atheism exactly like they're doing. They are exactly. I could not disagree. I mean, I could not agree with you more. I mean, there's nothing to disagree with you on because this is exactly what those groups are doing. They're prescribing the uses of the term atheist to mean a belief that God does not exist, and if you don't like that, you get kicked out of their group. But that's only for their group. But what they're trying to do is they're trying to apply it to people outside of their group. That's the problem I have with it. They can't do that.
But that's what every niche does, right? I mean, unless they're making a specific effort to not do it, right? If you go talk to a scientist on any subject, right, they're going to use the jargon that's in the culture that they're in.
True.
Like you might not want to be called a vertebrate, but they're going to call you a vertebrate because.
But the most they can do is would say, okay, Steve, in our group, you would be an atheist, but you don't identify as an atheist because you're not in our group, and you're free to identify as how you like and use terms the way you like. That's what I would like to hear. That's not what I hear. See the difference?
Well, yeah, because they're not attempting to. Well, I would say it probably depends on exactly who you're talking to, but in general, I imagine. They're not attempting to adopt your usage while talking to you. They're just using it as they see fit.
Yeah, but also one was when they say things like, if you're not a theist, you must be by necessity an atheist. That is a false statement because I would have to assume necessity always means global. Okay, in other words, not by a local argument, but by a global argument. I mean, there's no by their arguments, by necessity, you must be one or the other because they made that dichotomy. But globally, you don't, and so I have to assume when I hear the word necessity, I have to assume scope is going to be global rather than local. Don't you?
I'm not quite following you there. So get the situation straight in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So they have these predefined positions.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying if you're not a theist, then you're an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
Which is they'd be using the square as labeled that I have.
Yes.
As I have up.
Yes.
And with those preconceptions, that's not a false statement.
Correct.
It's only a false statement if you want to use a different definition. And if you say it's false because you want a different definition, you are prescribing a definition.
Yes. And the same thing, like I said, imagine theism being chicken here and atheism being duck. And I said, look, Dark, I'm having you over for dinner, man. Do you want duck or chicken? Those are your only options. By necessity, if you don't want duck, I give you chicken. Why? Because I've only got duck and chicken in my fridge or freezer. There are no other options to be had. That's locally, and that would be a case because you're creating a dichotomy there, and by disjunctive syllogism, if not one, then the other. So that's fine. But if somebody says by metaphysical necessity, you must have duck or chicken, that's wrong. By logical necessity, that's true, but by metaphysical necessity, that's false because there are other meats out there. I could have fish. Even though fish is not an option in that dichotomy because you've created it, metaphysically speaking, I still can have fish. That's the difference.
Given that everyone has to have at least two of these squares that they're rational and not lying and all that other stuff.
Yeah, you have to be. And by the way, I have to ask. You said you haven't watched. Did you watch my thing the other day? Because I pointed that out the other day that you have to have two positions, or did you come on that as your own?
No. I mean I've worked with square of opposition before and other things.
Yeah, I really pointed that out big time the other day because a lot of people weren't getting that concept. So you're the first person I think to really kind of, recognize that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, if you set it up properly, it's one of the ways I was taught to check it. Is there three positions?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely agree. Yep.
But given the logic of the square, they would be correct. Either you have to have one, or you have to have the other.
Yes.
You can't have both.
I agree because they're a contradiction. Yes.
Yeah. So they can set up a dichotomy. The dichotomy is: do you have the belief, or do you not have the belief?
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm. I'm agreeing with you.
Why were you saying they set up like a false dichotomy because there's other?
Well, I call it a false dichotomy because it's not a metaphysical dichotomy. It's a logical dichotomy in the sense that fish and chicken is a logical dichotomy, not fish then chicken, right? But that's not a metaphysical dichotomy because there are other types of meats out there. So when I say false dichotomy, I mean that they're setting it up in a way that makes it strictly a logical dichotomy merely because that's the only two options they're providing.
Oh, okay, but I don't see how it would be analogous, right? We both know there's other types of meat,
mm-hmm.
right? But given the logic in the square, you have to have one of the two, and you can't have both. So it really is the two options.
Yeah, that's called a local necessity. You're limiting the scope of the modal operator. In Alaic logic, you have modal operators, and one of which is necessary. And necessary basically means must be true in all possible worlds. This is only true in all possible worlds if you limit the scope to just theism and atheism. The same thing, like for example, theism is dichotomous to not theist, right? Those are a just straight up contradiction, right? If you're not in the set of theist, you're in the set of not theist, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that is a true dichotomy. Now, when you're changing the name of not theist to atheist, which is what they're doing, the dichotomy is still there, right? But I maybe you don't like the use of the term false dichotomy, and I can understand why. But I'm calling it a false dichotomy because it's just an arbitrary name that you've given to not theist to mean atheist, and now you're saying that that's going to be the dichotomy. It'd be no different to me saying theist or dog. Not theist, therefore dog. But I mean theist to mean not theist, right? I mean, I'm using the term dog. When you hear the word dog, I want you to think not theist, not the little fuzzy animal, but I want you to think of somebody who's not a theist. In that case, okay, it's a dichotomy, but does it seem appropriate to do that by just changing the name semantically from non-theist to dog? Because if I walked up to you, Dark, and I said, hey, either you're a theist or a dog, and you're like, what the hell are you talking about, Steve? Well, I mean dog to mean non-theist. You're like, okay, yeah, great. Yeah, sure. At that point, yeah, you're either a theist or a dog, but that's semantics, like literally semantics. It's silly, but that's exactly what they're doing. They're just renaming non-theist to mean atheist.
Okay, but they're taking the etymology of the word like really literally, right? They're using a to mean non, so non-theism.
Yeah, you know,
I get why they're doing it.
Yeah, well, that's
but,
what Bullivant would argue too. But non should be on the predication, non should be on the proposition, not the predication. Not means not P, doesn't mean not believe, and that's where a lot of them make their mistake when they're using that argument for the Greek alpha privative, that A means not. Well, yeah, but it means not proposition. In other words, if the proposition is God exists, the not proposition is God does not exist. It has nothing to do with the predication. That's where they make a fundamental mistake in their logic, I think.
Well, maybe, but I think that's still besides the point, because I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they're strictly defining these two positions as the belief and the not that belief.
Mm-hmm.
How does it collapse when the top right isn't defined as atheism?
Right, it's not defined as atheism. What do you call the top right, though? An atheist. They're still an atheist, right?
No, someone who includes that is an atheist, but they're an atheist because of the bottom.
It doesn't
right,
matter the reasons.
Top right.
But again, we're talking about semantics, right? Semantics. Yeah. So if semantically the top, the bottom. Look at the bottom right. We're going to call this an atheist, okay? I'm using ism-ist relationship. So if you hold atheism, we're going to call you an atheist. So the bottom position on the right is an atheist, according to them, right? But
it's atheism.
But the person who holds that position is an atheist.
Yeah, if that's included in their belief state.
Yeah. Now, the top position is also somebody who would be called atheist holding to atheism.
Yeah.
Right? So the top position is still an atheist, right?
Yeah, but that's not defined as atheist.
But we're not caring about the definitions. I even said at the beginning, definitions are going to be irrelevant because we're talking about the semantics. We're talking about the words themselves. Well, how you got to the word doesn't matter. The top position is still an atheist.
But an atheist wouldn't be the top position. You wouldn't define the top position as atheist.
But I'm not defining things prescriptively. I'm defining them descriptively. What do you call the person on the top right?
There is no person on the top right. That's what I'm trying to get. There's the isms, and then there's the ists. The ists would be in between the corners. The isms would be on the corners.
What do you mean the ists? No, I mean, like I said, an atheist is somebody who holds to atheism.
Yeah, someone who has that bottom right to them.
Yeah. And so the top right, it's still atheism, right? It's still an atheist would be holding that. If you want to go back to the isms, it's fine. The top right is still atheism. What other position do you want to call it?
No, not to them. It's not.
What do they call it?
They don't call it anything. They
don't call it anything.
At most, they refer to it as the strong position.
Right. They call it strong. Right. They call it strong atheism. Right.
Yeah, and they call it atheism because of the bottom right.
But they call
it strong because of the top right.
But they don't. People don't go around saying, "Oh, if you say I believe there's a God," you don't go around saying, "Oh, you're a strong theist."
Well, a strong theist is implied.
But okay, it's implied. So on the right hand side, you have theism on the top right. Again, we're talking about if you want to be consistent here, that would be strong theism, correct?
Yeah, if you want to say it but it's defined as theism.
You cannot. The problem that I'm having in all these discussions that people keep saying is defined. I'm not prescriptively defining anything in my argument.
Yeah, but they are.
Okay, but you're arguing it's my paper, right?
Yeah, but you're saying given their precondition that their semantics are collapsing, correct?
Well, giving my preconditions and using their wording, it would collapse, right? Because again. Do you think, okay, straight up, do you think it makes sense to say theism is on the top right and not call that strong theism and yet call atheism not strong atheism on the top right? If theism on the top left is just theism, then why would you have what does it mean to differentiate between strong and weak, right? Strong and weak just means strong means you hold the belief, weak means you do not, correct?
Yeah, it's just a shorthand.
Right. But in theism, if you hold the belief, that would be strong theism. If you hold atheism, if you hold the belief, that's strong atheism according to them. So on the right-hand side, if you're going to make that strong atheism to be consistent on the square of opposition, You've got to have strong atheism on the left hand side. You can't just arbitrarily remove that, or you're going to be inconsistent on your oppositions.
You mean strong theism?
Strong theism, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on the
I think
contrary
they'd be
line.
perfectly. I think they'd be perfectly fine saying that all theists are strong theists.
Really?
If you're limiting to belief, yeah.
I doubt it. I don't think they would be. I mean, it'd be interesting to ask them that, because again, a lot of them just say, well, it doesn't make sense to differentiate between strong and weak on theism. Like, why not? If you do it on atheism, you could certainly do it on theism.
Well, yeah, the reason why they do it on atheism is because there's two different, given the defining characteristic they're using.
Okay, but what about...
There are multiple versions of that, of people.
But then they would have to allow for theism to be defined prescriptively, if they're going to do it that way, to be a group that says, oh, hey, we're all theists because we don't believe God doesn't exist. Oh, you don't believe God doesn't exist? You're a theist.
All theists have the bottom left.
Correct.
Every single one of them.
Right. And so what happens if you define theism to be the bottom left?
But the thing is, if every single one of them have it, why do you need an extra?
Well, that's kind of irrelevant. I mean, I mean, again, that gets actually into more of the square of opposition where you have all and some, right? When you're dealing with the OAOE and things of that nature, right? The modes. And so top would be all, and then the bottom would be some. But in this, well, I mean, real quick, but just because all theists are like that, that doesn't preclude them or prescribe them from doing something like that. If theists wanted to say, look, we're going to start using the word theist to mean anybody who believes, or anybody who doesn't believe there's not a God, and they're going to make that left bottom corner theism, what would stop them from doing that?
Well, nothing. They just create their own culture.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's just like the ACA did.
We're doing an internal critique.
Well, I was actually kind of doing an internal critique of my argument and an external critique of theirs. But yeah.
Okay, so maybe I got this wrong. So is your argument a critique about yourself not being able, given your preconditions, to use their language, or is it a critique of their language in and of itself inside their own framework?
Yeah, I'm trying to point out the inconsistencies, right? That look, they're going to be like, oh, okay, well, we're just going to call this position theism because it has a belief, but we're not going to call. I mean, we're going to call the belief that God doesn't exist strong atheism. That's not parsimonious. There's a problem there.
They're not calling that strong atheism.
Yeah, they are. The top right.
Atheism is itself the lack of the belief.
But what are they calling the top right?
A strong atheist is someone who has the bottom right because they're an atheist. They believe atheism, right? They held that position. I guess they believe it's wrong. But they also have the top position.
Right, because you have to hold two positions.
Yeah, the top position isn't atheism. The top position is the thing that some atheists have along with being an atheist.
Right, because it's a subset. But the same position, like I said, but a theist could do the exact same thing and say the bottom left is the set of theists. In that set of theists, there's a subset who actually believe there's a God.
Yeah, they could, but that's not a problem for semantic collapse inside this framework they have.
It wouldn't be a problem, but the thing you would run into is then you would have the bottom part still become same as agnostic. That does collapse into agnostic.
But that's only if you're trying to apply an outside framework to their framework.
Well, not necessarily. Look at the bottom. The bottom right, which you have atheism, right, and the bottom left, you don't have a name for it. You don't. What do you want? Do you have a name for the bottom left?
If they're an atheist, it's what people shorthand for weak. If they're not an atheist and they have that, they're just every other theist.
All right, so you theoretically could label this a couple different ways. You could do the top right, strong atheism, bottom left, weak atheism. Right?
Well, no,
you couldn't, because that would be because that's a contradiction. They have to be opposite each other.
Because there are two different.
Yeah, it has to be weak theism. It has to be weak theism.
There are two different groups of people that can hold the bottom left.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one group of people that can hold the top right.
Correct. Yeah, strong atheists can hold the top right, and agnostics can hold the bottom left, or theists could hold the bottom left.
And that's one of the reasons why it shouldn't be a defining feature. That's probably why it's not a defining feature.
Well, let's look at that, though, because you're absolutely right. So if you're an agnostic and you do hold the bottom right and you hold the bottom left, the atheist will say, well, because you hold the bottom left, you're an atheist, correct?
Yeah, they would umbrella you in.
Right.
Yeah.
And of course, Dr. Oppie notes that atheism agnostic is no more closer to atheism than is theism, because if you actually did it the theist way and say, okay, well, anybody who doesn't believe there's not a God is a theist. Now the bottom left becomes theism, and an agnostic is somebody who doesn't believe there's a God and doesn't believe that there is a God still. Because that's what it still is. I mean, it doesn't really change that. But I mean, the theist, like I said, could just do it in reverse. So if the atheists are allowed to do it and the theists are allowed to do it, that proves that agnostic is the same position as weak theism or weak atheism. There's no difference.
Well, no, I would. Well, I don't know, because you can define agnosticism as a proposition.
Well,
that's fairly common.
But that's in the epistemological domain. That's dealing with the nobility of gods, and that's we're not using it that way. We're talking about the ontological existence of God. Agnosticism is the state of mind where you just don't have a decision either way, right? There's a proposition of agnosticism, but that deals with the knowability of gods, and that's a different domain.
Yeah, if you were just writing out the logic that's like on the square on a piece of paper, they would call a weak atheist and agnostic the same position.
Yeah, but also weak theist is the same position as agnostic. I mean, this is provable.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's provable. If you don't have a positive epistemic status, if you're not and the opposition shows it visually, if you're not one of the top upper corners, you must be both bottom corners.
Yeah. In 1980, you don't have to go that far back, but I'm going that far back just to have it more clear cut. In 1980, every person that called themselves a weak atheist today would have been called an agnostic.
Yeah, up until 74. 1974 probably. Yeah. That's when Smith wrote a case against atheism, or even 72 when Flew wrote his paper, Presumption of Atheism.
Yeah, well, I was leaving some lag time for the population to catch up.
Yeah, sure. And but again, that's only in small little pockets. And again, in other parts of the world, they don't use that. In other parts of the world, if you say you're an atheist, they're going to be interpreting that as somebody who believes there's no God.
Yeah. I mean, even most Christians that you'll talk to on the internet that are from America, will assume,
because that's what I think most people's positions is. I think agnostic is really much rarer than people think. I think that most of these, at least I should say, in the communities that we deal with, in the atheists we talk to, I think most people who self-identify atheist are atheists in the sense that they believe there's no God. I really do believe that.
I actually believe that too, and I have a little argument for it that I always get kicked out of the room for. But that's still beside the point. But what I'm trying to point out here, if they're not defining the top right and the bottom left as anything, then how is there a collapse?
Well, there's not. The collapse comes in when you start breaking it up into weak atheism and things of that nature. What this shows here, right? This is just an arbitrary name. That's it. It's just an arbitrary renaming of not theism. That's what I was trying to go for here. That's it. This doesn't show the semantic collapse. This just shows that it's an arbitrary renaming of non-theist just to mean atheist. We're going to call it atheist. You can call it anything you want, right? That's all that showed. That's just setting that up. That's all. Yeah, because this doesn't show the semantic collapse. The semantic collapse comes in when you start referring to people that have no belief either way, that under them would be both agnostic, would be atheist, and would be theist if theists start using it that way. That's where the semantic collapse comes in.
I don't think I actually have it. All right. Well, I can. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just using this to sort of illustrate it. The ists, the actual people, are not on the corners, right? So when someone says, I am a weak atheist, they're not saying the lack of belief in there not being a God is weak atheism. They're saying they hold the bottom two positions.
I've heard differently.
They would be in the middle.
Yeah, I know.
Between those two positions.
I have to disagree because I think people have used it differently. Some people have not read the Flew's work. They actually think weak atheism is a matter of conviction rather than not a matter of negation.
Right. Theory of knowledge. Change. They have a different theory of knowledge.
Right. Exactly.
I understand that.
Yeah, and we're not to go into different theories of knowledge or anything like that, but yes, you're exactly right. And so I don't really care about the level of conviction. Now, obviously, if you believe something, you have a higher level of conviction, right? I mean, you've obviously crossed the threshold of being convinced, and then you have different degrees of being convinced. You have beliefs, no certainty. Then, if you really want to get into the highest, like epistemic certainty, which if such a thing exists. You fall somewhere on that spectrum. So they would be saying that anybody who's not convinced there's a God is going to be an atheist. But anybody who's not convinced there's a God is also agnostic if they don't have a positive belief. That's where the semantic collapse comes in, because now you have a position of somebody who, like, for example, if somebody says they're a weak atheist, that doesn't tell me where they fall on this square of opposition, does it? Because you can have one of two places.
A weak atheist?
Yeah, because logically, I'll think about this. Logically, you're bottom right. Logically, at least you're bottom right. But
yeah,
then
you have to be if you're an atheist.
You have to be, right? It's not sufficient, but it's necessary. So if I say, okay, you're a weak atheist, but are you a weak atheist? Are you somebody? You're actually a strong atheist, which to me is weird, because I mean, strong atheism is a subset of weak atheism. But when people say they're a weak atheist, that usually implies, and again, this gets into beyond logic. This gets into connotations of semantics. This is why you have to use a Euler diagram. But they would imply that they're not a strong atheist. It would imply that they have no position either way. That's what it implies. If I hear somebody say they're a weak atheist, to me that doesn't imply that they believe there's a God, that there's no God, because then they would just be saying they're a strong atheist if they're going to use that kind of dichotomy or a language dichotomy.
Yeah, but I would say if we're sticking to the square there, we're not going on. We're not taking a step beyond it and going, well, now I'm talking about not only do I believe, I know, and that's what makes me a strong or weak.
Oh, yeah, no, right? That's fine too. But again, if you say you're a weak atheist, where are you on here?
Well, the only place for you would be in between the bottom two corners.
Yeah, but they
can't be anywhere else.
I mean, where are you going to be? Dead center then? I mean,
yeah.
I mean, I visualize what you're saying, but I don't think this is really set up to be positional, because you can't just sit in the middle here. There's no position there.
Yeah, this isn't set up for the ists.
Yeah.
This is only the square only works for the isms.
Yes, yeah, for the logic.
Because the isms are the corners.
Yes,
by definition, no matter where you want to put them on the table, they have to be.
Okay, but let's stick with the corners then, and just stick with the isms. If you're bottom right, if somebody says I'm a weak atheist, okay, boom. Let's say I know that about them. That they say they're weak atheists, so they're bottom right at least. And then how do you find out if they're also upper right or bottom left?
They'll say that they're a weak or strong atheist.
If they say if they say a strong atheist, they're going to be top, right?
Yeah, and if they say they're weak, they're going to have also the bottom position.
Okay, but process by elimination then. If you're not the top and you're not just the bottom, you have to be one other position. That would be the bottom left. So that's why I said it implies to me that they're bottom left as well. If they just say weak atheist, it implies they're on the bottom completely.
Yeah, they have both they are the orange triangle.
Right, which means weak atheism is logically agnosticism. You just proved it.
They're identical.
Yes.
Given your definition of agnosticism, they are identical.
Well, that's standard. I mean, that's ubiquitous. I don't know why people think that my definition is anything unique. It's the same thing that the entire literature uses.
I just don't want to bring some authority because it's just me and you talk. I'm just like, me personally, I usually don't define it as that. I define it as the proposition.
Okay.
Because I like defining things as an affirmative thing.
Yeah, well, agnosticism still is a second order belief, but that's neither here nor there. But so again, when somebody comes in and they say, "Hey, I'm a weak atheist," you can see why somebody like myself would be like, "Well, yeah, but what's your position?" Because you're only telling me part of your position. Either you're upper, right, or lower. I can infer that they're a lower, but there are people when I talk to them, they're like, "Oh, I'm a weak atheist." I'm like, "So, do you believe there's no gods?" Yeah, I believe there's no gods. Then wouldn't you be a strong atheist? And
I would say that's someone outside the norm.
It has happened. I've also had so if you're a weak atheist, and in my usages, as you want to just talk about internal, in my usages, I would be calling that agnostic. But then they balk at that. And it's like, well, but that's how I'm using those terms. But I don't want to be called a weak atheist or an atheist. You don't want to be called agnostic. So that's fine. I'm not going to call them an agnostic if they're bottom left, but I want them to understand that in my system, they're an agnostic. Just like I recognize in their system, I'd be an atheist. I'm not ignorant. I understand the topic. I've never said that I'm not. I've always said in their system, sure, but I reject their system.
Yeah,
that's the difference.
I get some popular books among I hesitate to call them atheists because they call themselves agnostic in their book, like Richard Dawkins.
Yeah, well, he's all over the place on that crap.
Yeah.
He's an atheist. He's not agnostic.
Yeah,
Come on.
I mean, I mean, there's been interviews where he says he's agnostic.
I know, I've heard, and I think it's full
And
of
he
shit.
says it in his book.
I know, and I think it's full of shit.
Yeah, but I was like a lot of those people, that generation of atheism.
Yeah, he's
right?
he's one of those people who would say he's a weak atheist or an atheist, or he'd be or be an agnostic. He just wants. I mean, he's just all over the place.
Yeah, well, what I'm saying, they badmouth the word, right? So no one wants to be called it anymore.
Yeah, wow.
But if you took those people that mean, if translating it to the system that you use,
yeah,
that mean agnosticism, if you ask them to place where agnosticism is, they would put it in the same position.
Right. That'd be those the only logical place that they can put it. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But
but doesn't that prove my point?
Well, no, I don't see how that causes collapse, though.
Because now you have the word agnostic to mean the same thing as what people mean by atheism. If people
someone who's a weak atheist, it would be an agnostic,
right? But they're not. But here's the argument. They're using weak atheism, and they're just calling it atheism. They're shortening it. They're just calling that atheism. They're not distinguishing any longer with that weak. I mean, it's most people would, if they look at the logic. I haven't had too many people not grasp this, although obviously some have.
Wait, okay.
But they have most of them have grasped that logically weak atheism is the same as agnosticism, is the same as weak theism. That I have proven multiple different ways, and if somebody hasn't got it by now, I don't know what to tell them. But that's been well established. But they're not saying weak atheist. They're saying atheist.
Yeah, I think there might have been a disconnect between us. When someone says a weak atheist, they mean they have the position in the bottom left, in addition to the position.
I think so. I think
right.
so as well. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. But
they're not referring to the bottom right as weak atheism. They're just saying that's atheism.
Yeah, that's so. But here's the thing: if they're holding bottom right as atheism, and both of them as weak atheism, then if you look at the logic, they're both atheist and weak atheist, right? That's a conjunction. The bottom part is
it would be a subset.
It'd be a
subset,
but now they're all over the place because it's like, okay, are you a weak atheist or you're an atheist? Because now you have the logic for both. You're in both corners.
They would be both.
Yes.
If you're in a subset, you're in the set.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but you can see how confusing it is when they start using their. I mean, which system do you think makes more sense rationally, though? The ones that I use, which is ubiquitous, or the ones the new atheists are trying to use? I mean, to you personally, which one do you think makes sense more?
I think functionally your systems are exactly the same.
How can they be exactly the same when they'll identify as an atheist or a weak atheist and mean it to be the same position as agnostic?
Well, weak atheist is the same as agnostic, not atheism.
Right, but they're calling that position atheism.
Yeah, because it's in the subset of atheism, because the defining characteristic for them is the bottom right.
Right, but what's the difference between an atheist and a weak atheist, according to them?
A weak atheist is someone who also has the bottom left.
But no, a weak atheist to them is somebody who because they automatically have the bottom left. They don't have the top right. So what is the differentiation? Yeah. If somebody says I'm a weak atheist, how do you differentiate between them and a just an atheist? Because if they say they're an atheist and they mean weak atheism, this is what they're using it as. Those are synonymous terms. They're using remember they're using non-theist, weak atheism, and atheism all to mean the exact same thing, which means you can instantiate any one for the other and have supposedly you have transparency, right? It shouldn't be opaque in the proposition. It shouldn't change the proposition value, right? If you are you familiar with opacities on a proposition?
I don't think, at least not by that name.
Yeah, okay, but it's not that typical. Basically, it basically saying that if you change something in a proposition semantically and it changes the truth value, it's considered to be opaque. If you can, it's transparent. Okay. In other words, if I say that I pre-Superman days, like before Lois Lane knew Superman was Clark Kent, if I said Lois Lane knows Superman can fly, that's a true statement, right? But if I instantiate Clark Kent into Superman, they're the same being, right? And I say Lois Lane knows Clark Kent can fly, that's a false statement. That statement is opaque. There's opacity there. So they're using these things to be transparent, where you can instantiate one word for another, and it does not change the propositional value.
Yeah, but I think you're misunderstanding the mass majority of them. I don't think they're using those terms interchangeably.
I am. They are. No, absolutely they are. They mean lit. I've had conversations with Aaron Raw on this, where he would say non-theist and atheist mean the exact same thing. And according to their dichotomy, it would, right?
Yeah.
It's just renaming the set.
Yeah, I agree.
So if somebody says they're an atheist, again, I have to figure out what they mean by that. If they can mean two different possible positions. They can mean, oh, I'm an atheist. I believe there's no God. Or they can say I'm an atheist because I have no position either way, which semantically collapses with agnostic.
They have no position. Well, it's not semantic collapsing with agnostic. It's the same position.
But the semantic collapse means you have two terms now that mean the exact same thing. There's no differentiation on their usage.
Yeah, but most of them, as far as from my experience goes, define agnosticism as a proposition.
Right, but we're talking about the ontological domain. I mean, again, they could the Dan Barkers of the world, they can use agnostic and anti-theist. I mean, they change their words usages completely, right? I mean, because they're like, anti-theist means somebody who believes there's no God. Now, that's not what it means in philosophy. That's just hardly ever used that way, right?
Yeah, and if you, a lot of those people also, if you're trying to find out the more precise position than just atheist, a lot of them say agnostic atheist. That's weak atheism,
right? Which even Matt Dillahunty rejects. It has a lot of issues to it.
I mean, I think it does too.
Yeah.
I don't like them because I describe it as the proposition, which then implies no ability, which then becomes a completely different thing from belief to start with.
Well, I mean, belief is as Matt does get right, knowledge is a subset of belief, and when you start looking at the actual axes of those quadrant things, which I'm going to be doing with somebody probably soon. We didn't have time last show to do it on the Non Sequitur show. It's wrought with it's just issues. The whole agnostic atheism thing is complete garbage. But I think just going back to this though, I think the hangups you have is if you want to have a legitimate critique of my work, I think a good argument is that it's switched between internal and external critiques, which is not a deal breaker for an argument. There is some value to be had there, and it's not easy to stick within an internal critique versus an external. We've all been there where we switch back and forth on the fly, right?
I mean, I do it sometimes, but usually by mistake.
Yeah. I agree. It's usually you usually try to stick within just doing an internal critique. But it's hard to. I wasn't trying to do an internal critique of their argument. I was doing my own work and showing this is what happens by using these terms. But if you're strictly in their usages, then I would probably concede there's no semantic collapse only because they're not using agnostic the way everybody else would use it, right?
Anyone outside of them.
Yeah, everybody's outside of them, right? So my paper isn't written for the people that are in the ACA because they could just semantically call anything they want, right? They're not going to label the bottom usages agnostic. But if you notice, though, the papers I use are not from their little group. The papers I use to get the nomenclature are what I'm using to describe how this would actually work from a philosophical point of view, not from their point of view. Does that kind of make sense?
Maybe I misunderstood the because someone shared me. You had a few versions.
Yeah,
I saw a few different versions of what you wrote up, and it seems like it's a critique of their position.
No, not really.
The way they use it.
No, I mean there's some elements of that, right? Because again, there's an element of you're just changing non-theist by calling it something else. That's true. We both agree that's exactly what they're doing. They can call non-theist any word they want. Give me a word. Make a word up. It doesn't matter. They're just saying that represents all the elements in the set of the group that's not in theist.
Okay, so the collapse is actually on your end if you use their framework.
Correct. Yeah.
Isn't that the chief criticism? That's
no.
A semantic collapse?
Well, the chief criticism is they're not even really using weak atheism, right? That they're not really calling their position specifically weak atheism. They're just calling it atheism.
Yeah,
right?
They won't say weak atheism unless you pry it out of them.
Right. And so they're switching between their own schemas to some degree, right? Because they shouldn't be able to differentiate between weak atheism and strong atheism if they're just saying that all the, they're just atheists because they're not theist. At that point, they're just setting up this dichotomy that I don't think exists, because you have the bottom part. Because the bottom part shows there are three positions, right? 1, 2, and 3. You have them highlighted: red, orange, and blue. There are three positions you can have according to the square, and they're subsuming that bottom to be blue.
Well, no.
Yes.
No, because the orange would be a weak atheist, and the blue would be a strong atheist.
But they're both atheists. They're both in the subset of atheists. They're subsuming.
Yeah, both in the subset of atheists because of the corner position.
But irrelevant. They're still subsuming the bottom part.
Well, it's really relevant if that's how the framework is set up.
But that's just honest, though. That's just, the square of opposition shows there are legitimate three logical positions. They're just taking the bottom logical. They're taking the bottom logical position and calling it the same thing as if they're in the blue.
Well, they're saying it's a subset, but they have three positions: theism, weak atheism, strong atheism.
No. Those are not. But those are subsets. Those are not independent positions of each other. The colors you have here are three independent positions. You can only be in one of those colors. Matter of fact, you have them overlap, which, obviously on an actual diagram they won't overlap because there's nobody in the. Yeah.
This isn't a Venn.
Well, it wouldn't be that. This is actually more. You have more of a. It's called a. There's a type of diagram. I just used it using rectangles, and I can't think of the freaking name of it. But irrelevant. I got what you're doing. But a person who has the bottom two positions, they're calling that atheist. They're also calling the person who has the side positions, the top and bottom, atheist. So they're taking three positions, three pieces of the epistemic pie, and they're subsuming one of them, so they get two shots at it to call them atheist, which I find to be extremely dishonest. Because a theist could do the exact same thing. This is my WASP argument, right? The weak atheist special pleading argument. The theist could say, oh, look, everybody who believes God exists, obviously is a theist, but anybody who doesn't believe that God does not exist is also a theist. Therefore, the orange is red. Therefore, the side and the bottom are all theists. The theists could do the exact same thing. What precludes them from doing that?
They could, but it would be. I've never run into a theist that said that they don't believe that there's a God.
But they could, right? Theoretically. If the atheist is allowed to do it, why is it the theist? Also, special pleading.
They're allowed because you can make your own definition. Like you said, the definition is not prescriptive.
Right.
But
so
find me one theist that does it anywhere.
Well, maybe they might start. A few of them have been they've been interested in my diagrams and my work and going, So what happens if you do have? I by the way, I haven't stopped any theists from doing it. Nobody's, why I don't know why somebody hasn't yet, but I mean.
Oh, what would happen is people would argue over definitions.
Yes, well, I mean, I know Braxton Hunter, I think, touched on this. I think he kind of tried to run the same kind of thing. I think it was Braxton. So they have touched on it a little bit, but I mean, but still, if a theist started using this word that way, and it became colloquialized and it became situated in the region, then the dictionary would reflect that, and the dictionary would now say theism, the belief or non-belief of the God does not exist. Or the belief that God exists or the non-belief that God does not exist. It would reflect usage, just like it does now in Merriam-Webster. But by the way, it was atheists who got that changed. They wanted to reflect their usage.
I remember the day that it actually changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I noticed it changed anyway.
Yeah, no, it was not that long ago. It was only, I think, 10 or 20 years ago or something like that, if I remember. It was Merriam-Webster changed.
Right after I got out of high school.
Yeah, Merriam-Webster, and it was David Silverman, I think, that was leading that charge. Or he was one of the people, right?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, Flamo's a theist. He said that on my channel. He's going to start using theist that way to mean anybody who doesn't believe that God does not exist. But I'm saying that you have to give them the opportunity to do so, or that is special pleading. That's my WASP argument. Nobody's assailed that one either, because you can't allow atheists to do it and not allow theists to do it. And you're just going to appeal to dictionary. That's a fallacy,
Well, if that's the standard, wouldn't every arbitrary set of definitions for a framework like that, wouldn't that fall into the exact same criticism?
Well, I think the problem is that when you start using arbitrary definitions and you start making prescriptively them, that's when the problems start to arise. And this is why I'm against prescriptivism. The only type of prescriptivism I could even see ever being utilized is what I call soft prescriptivism, which just means that if you want to understand something that you're reading, you ought to use the usages that's normative. right? And that's what I mean by normative in that case. It's you ought to, not that you must, not there's a moral obligation to. That's why it's only soft prescriptivism. But if I read a paper on this topic, like Dr. Demi's paper, in order to understand his paper, I'm going to have to understand what he means by atheism, and he means it in the strong case. So in order to read his paper, I ought to use atheism in the strong case in order to read that paper. Or else I'm not going to understand it right. If an ACA person read a paper on atheism, I think the vast majority of them wouldn't understand it if they're in their mind thinking that atheism is merely a lack of belief. They're not going to understand that paper in context. They cannot do an internal critique on it.
Well, it's dependent on how willing they are to step outside of the
well, or they may not be able to. They may be so ingrained in their mind that this is the only way that it is, and I think a lot of them are. I've ran into people that think that no.
Well, I'm sure. I don't know about if I can say most or not because I don't know enough about the.
But many have. I'm not going to give a quantification, but I can tell you right now, for an absolute fact, I've met people like that many times.
Yeah, well, I mean, generally in a culture, you have the. It's I think Price's law actually applies. It's like the square root of the people in the group are the people that can actually do the work, right? And then everyone else is just kind of there.
Follows along with it. Yeah, and they just regurgitate and parrot what the other people say, but they are so ingrained that, oh no, you must be an atheist or theist by metaphysical, nomological, and logical laws. That's wrong when they say that. And then people say, well, Steve, you're saying that their system is wrong. Oh, no, what I'm saying is they're making a statement that is not true for the proposition. If they started like limiting their scope, it would then make that statement true. But
given their the preconceptions, like the how do you put it, the premises they're assuming to come to that conclusion, it's actually correct given this premise.
No, it's not. And here's the reason. Again, local scope does not take the place of global scope. You cannot use the term necessary unless you clearly identify your scope is going to be local. I cannot say.
But they're not writing a paper.
I'm being technical here. My paper was a technical paper. I'm not trying to. I'm not. Saying that my paper was not supposed to be technical. It was a technical paper for this very reason. Because there's a difference between saying chicken or fish logically and chicken and fish metaphysically, right? Logically, you can only have chicken and fish if those are the only two things I offer to you. There's a dichotomy there. That's not a false dichotomy. In fact, people used to complain about this with me, and I would kind of like have to explain to them. If I give you two choices in a voting thing, I'm not creating a false dichotomy unless I say those are the only two choices that are metaphysically available to you. If I'm just giving you two options, that's not a false dichotomy. I'm well aware there's multiple different options I could have given you, but I'm not interested in those options or for your opinion, right? But they're telling me that atheism and theism are metaphysically such that you must be one or the other. That's completely fucking wrong. There's no way in the world that can ever be correct.
Well, I'm not sure how you could say that it's wrong if you're not prescribing a definition.
Because the dichotomy has to be from first principles. Theist versus not theist is a dichotomy by first principles because of the law of negation. That's always true. P or not P is always true. So if I instantiate that with a word, pick any word you want, dog, or not dog, that follows logically and metaphysically. Yeah. Once I start making arbitrary instantiations of just semantic words, then I'm not creating a metaphysical necessity. I'm just having the same logical necessity, but it's just semantics at that point.
But if you're listening to them and you understand that when they say atheist, when they say atheism,
yes,
to be specific, they mean non-theism.
I know, but if
they're giving you an actual dichotomy, but if I say, not just a selective one.
But if I say you must be a theist or a dog, and I mean dog to be atheist, but I say, okay, well, if you're not a theist, you are by necessity a dog. This seems odd, doesn't it to you? But I mean dog to be non-theist. Well, but all you're doing is that's a semantic game.
I'm not sure that's a fair characterization.
It's exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing.
I'm not sure. Dog seems way more absurd.
Why? Again, words are signifiers. Words just they have a reference and a referent. The referent points to a reference, some object, right? So if let's say the dog could be, let's say, some language that literally means not theist. That's what it means. They just say the word dog. I'm just enunciating it, right? I'm not talking about the little fuzzy four-legged animal that we all love and adore. They're so cute. I love puppies. I'm not talking about that. When I say dog, D-O-G, I'm using it to mean the exact same thing as a non-theist. It's just an arbitrary semantic change. That's it.
But I'm not going to say it's as arbitrary. It literally can't be. They're taking a word that's
Why?
in the subject already.
But it's still
Right?
arbitrary.
And they're taking a characteristic.
But I want to use dog. I think dog sounds better
Well,
for somebody who's not a theist, right?
Use dog. I'm pointing out how what they're doing is way less arbitrary.
Because dog is the opposite of God, right? Dog is God backwards.
Yeah,
so
in reverse,
right? So if you're not a theist, you're a dog by necessity.
Yeah, no, I'm still not. Unless you point out specifically that it's just God in reverse, then I think people would have less of a problem with it.
But they have to do the same thing. They have to keep pointing out that they're using atheism in a very atypical way.
Well, I don't think at this point they are.
Oh, they are. It's very atypical.
But atypical to what?
To use atheism to mean non-theist. That's very atypical.
But in what realm is it?
Anywhere outside of their own little pockets, other countries, and in philosophy. But
philosophy is what you would call a niche.
No. Would you call science a niche? I mean, I would call it a domain of discourse.
I guess it depends on what you mean specifically.
I wouldn't call
science,
it.
But yeah, I would say it's a niche.
I would say more as a domain of discourse, right? If I say evolution, right? An evolution, and we're talking biology. Most people are going to understand when I mean biology, evolution, right? A change of allelic frequencies. Most people that study biology are going to understand it's some kind of change of allelic frequency or heritable traits passed on from one generation to the next. That's what I mean by evolution. Now, if some group said, hey, well, we're not using evolution like that. We mean evolution just to mean change. Therefore, as you change, you're evolving. Well, in biology, that doesn't work because an organism cannot evolve. A species has to evolve, right? So there's a fundamental disconnect with how the words are being used. But if you say, oh, but creationists aren't using the words like that, they mean evolutionists means change. So when evolution says, oh, well, yeah, you're changing, therefore you're evolving, I'm trying to explain to them, no, that's an atypical usage. That's not how it is in science. That's the exact same analogy I'm doing with philosophy. Exactly the same. Only in this case, the ACA and those new atheists are the creationists.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see any problem specifically with them being the creationists. You already accepted that words are not prescriptive.
Right. But the point being is, if an atheist if a creationist says evolution just means change, therefore you're evolving, sure, I accept that they could use that in their little group. But they're trying to use it outside the group. They're trying to tell scientists and biologists, oh, no, you know, we're using this word evolution this way, therefore an individual evolves. But a biologist would say, no, an individual does not evolve. We don't use that word that way. We reject it. How is that any different from me as somebody who likes philosophy? And philosophers go, look, we don't use that word the way the ACA uses it. We reject that usage of it.
But that usage is far bigger than the ACA.
Not by much. And even if it was, it's not big in the domain of philosophy. It's very small.
I would say outside of the realm of theists, it is by far the most common usage.
I know people all over the world that reject that usage, and they
I do too.
Yeah.
But I run into multiple times more that use that usage.
Yeah, but how many of them? But how many of them in philosophy use it? I see very little, if any. There's Michael Martin. There's Bullivant, who's a theist. There's Flew, and there's Smith, who didn't even finish his degree in anything. And so I'm not that's a big deal. I mean, I'm not trying to disparage him for that. I didn't either. But I mean, he's not an expert to be cited on that particular subject. And so basically, it's Flew, Martin, and Bullivant, and two of them are dead. And even Martin had some issues with it. I mean, Martin, he didn't think Smith's work was that great.
But I'm not really sure what's it like. Why would it matter if an authority is choosing a definition that isn't prescriptive?
Well, it's not. But I mean, if people cite Smith, a lot of them do so as like he's some authority. Like Martin would be considered to be an expert. All right, Flew was an expert, and even though he lost his mind, he still was an expert. I wouldn't consider Smith an expert or anything. So if you cite him, I would be very careful on making sure that it's pointed out that you're not citing him as an expertise. You're just talking about his arguments. Like when people cite me, they cannot cite me as an expert. That'd be stupid, right? Nobody should ever cite me as an expert because I'm clearly not an expert. But if they want to cite me, they would cite me, as Steve, like Steve's argument is this blah blah blah, but somehow note in there that they're not citing me as some kind of authoritative figure that must be this way.
Okay, wait, but if words in English are not prescriptive, what does it matter if an authority is like if you're saying you ought to use it like this,
like Draper does.
Because they're an authority that is prescribing a definition.
No, it's not. It's soft prescriptionism in a way. I mean, I wouldn't call it hard prescription. They would say, okay, look, this is why you ought to use it this way because, as Draper points out in SCP, there's multiple. He points out 3 issues by using it their way, 3 major issues, and he goes to avoid those issues. We should use it the way we've been using it for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And that's an argument, right? That you ought to be using it that way, but it doesn't mean that you must. And that's the difference. When they're prescribing something, they're saying you must use it this way. They're telling me atheism is merely the lack of belief and you must use it that way. That's wrong. I don't must use it that way. It's like I said, you don't have to, it's not must to use atheism as the positive belief, right? It's not a must. It's if you want to read the papers, it would make sense to do so. So why would somebody adopt weak atheism as atheism and then go read the philosophical papers and try to understand them? They're not going to be able to do it. Would you agree? And we have super chat.
I would say it depends on the person.
Yeah, that's true. Ghost of Recon 499. Hey, Ghost. He says, I know I'm behind, but Keynesian economics is BS. It's magic. Yes. I look. I am the first to admit. I had extreme difficulties in economics. I saw some subjects I just do a little bit better on than others. I think everybody has their own little, as you would use the word, niche. But I think people have to know their limitations of certain things, and economics was a severe limitation of mine. I mean, you get into the gross national product and gross domestic product and what considered to be inflation and stagflation, and all that other stuff. That was all fine. I was just rote memorization. That's the only reason I passed. But once you start getting into the diffy Qs of figuring out the actual supply and demand curves, that was some hard shit, dude.
Well,
way harder than nuclear stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, to address that, the issue is Keynes was right. It's just Keynes underestimated the human's ability to game systems.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, no, the guys. Look, I'm not against Keynes is genius. I mean, his shit's genius level. Don't get me wrong. Nobody else. I mean, I don't know how anybody came up with the stuff he came up with, but it's so complicated that the average person, without a huge investment of their time, is not going to be able to understand his work. Like I said, because we just taking a course in macro and microeconomics where they just give you the basics, right? I didn't have the prerequisites to understand what the hell I was looking at.
But it basically all niches of modern economics are Keynesian with a twist, unless you're an Austrian. But basically, everyone's Keynes something.
Yeah. No, I think he models correctly. I think that, but you got to admit, it's hard, right? It's not easy. It's very difficult.
Sure if most economic professionals, not to say professors, would probably hate me for saying that.
Yeah, I think quantum would be easier than economics. Quantum, I could probably, if I ever really did try to understand it, probably do a little bit better than I would economics. But anyways, back to this. So I don't think there's really any really major disagreements here. I don't think we have really made any major arguments. I think this is basically, between an internal external critique, because everything you say is right. I mean, and you understood, by the way, and I mean this very sincerely, you've understood this 10,000 fold more than most people have ever tried. And that means a lot to me that you put, you actually read it and you actually, really didn't do your due diligence. And that's huge, man. That's freaking gargantuan.
Oh, I'm just used to reading things.
Well, yeah, but a lot of people try to say my argument and they have no idea what the hell it's even saying. You know exactly what it's saying. I think the disagreement is just a matter of just preference of, just saying that if you're doing an internal critique of their particular position, then it doesn't lead to semantic collapse. I'm going to be iffy on that. I mean, sure, even if it doesn't, to me, it's kind of irrelevant. It's in philosophy. If we start adopting their usages, then I've proven, I think, that it leads to semantic collapse.
Yeah, if the other framework is the norm, the paper should cite the new definitions.
Yeah,
right? They would have to until it became the norm.
yeah, but even still, even if I did that, even if I took away all definitions, obviously the logic still holds. I think that everybody agrees by that by now. I've actually had only a few people say, "Oh, your logic's off," and I'm like, "Where?" I'm like, and they never show
Oh
it.
yeah, I
Obviously,
mean,
they never show the logic
oh yeah.
off.
Well, saying the logic's off is ridiculous because the square of opposition is pretty well instantiated in,
Yeah, I mean,
in logic.
the only you know what's so funny is there is a one issue with the square of opposition that does exist, and nobody's ever brought it up to me.
Oh yeah, that's where the modified square, where it's really just the x.
Yeah, there's a
That one?
modified. There's a modified square of opposition. The reason being is because in the original square of opposition by Aristotle, um, it fails a little bit when it comes to empty sets, vacuous tautologies, vacuous
Yeah.
sets, and that has been a long-standing thing when you start getting into categorical things like all, some, right, and you get into those modes. But that's not. This is not a canonical square of opposition. This is a semiotic square of opposition. It
Yeah.
doesn't have that problem.
That was actually the first thing I noticed. Because I wasn't aware of it being used outside of the basic education I got in philosophy class.
Which would be categorical.
Yeah, and
Right.
then I looked at all of the relationships on the corners. I'm like, well, there isn't a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, so this alleviated, I think, that problem because I'm not claiming proper subsets and subsets. I'm not claiming a sum of all, and so there's no real issue there. But this is why this is called a semiotic square of opposition, which, by the way, I didn't come up with. Obviously, that's been around Greece, not Greece, Grimace, and it's used for multiple things to show relationships. And I only had one person argue, "Oh, you can't use a square like that." Well, why not? And then I show them it's out there that the symbiotic square of opposition has been around for quite some time. Actually, they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that." I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't make this stuff up. I'm just using other people's work. All work is derivative, right?" Hey, real quick, Logic Only Zone. Hey, what's up, Logic? And the Kawasa, good discussion. Big thanks to our guest. Yeah, I love this stuff. Do you mind if I open this up a little bit? Before,
No, I don't care.
I've only got a few more minutes. I'm going to open this up if anyone wants to join in. Anybody got questions? I do have to run to the bathroom real quick. Can you entertain my audience real quick?
I don't know how entertaining I am, but I can try.
All right. You looking the outside because maybe they can ask you questions.
Yeah.
All right, I'll be right back.
Maybe I'll bring it.
All right, I'll be right back.
There we go. Okay, any questions?
I
put them down there. I'll try to answer.
By the way, I put the link out there so people join. I'll bring them in a second. Okay.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say something. Oh, and I was going to say I think Steve would agree. If we removed all the labels from the corners and in between and all the other stuff, I think everyone that is decent at logic, that's probably a hideous way to phrase that, is going to agree. Right? We're just people are just arguing over what word belongs where. And as Steve said, internally it doesn't collapse. But I would actually give a little bit on that and say, because it's not an individual but a culture of people, a group of people, it's gonna end up being fuzzy because everyone's gonna understand it just a little bit differently, and they're not going to always identify very precisely. They're not always going to say weak atheism. Lots of times they're just going to say atheist because they all want to be in the carnival tent, but they don't want to say what carnival game they're at. Yeah. Can you say something funny? Nothing that wouldn't get Steve's channel in trouble. I'm an edgy boy when it comes to humor. I can't give you a knock joke. There's no one here to reply to me. I would have to look up a limerick. I don't think I've ever recited a limerick in my whole life. Huh. Historical economist or economic historian. Uh, if Oh, okay.
I'm back.
Just really quickly answer this last guy's question. Very, very specifically, if you're going to look up sort of my field of study, it's going to be anthropology, but a subset of anthropology that is the economics of anthropology.
Did you ever watch the show when we had the new mysticist, Rick Yifa, I think his last name was, on the Non Sequitur show? It was one of the better episodes. I mean, I don't know what it was. I'm not interested in coin collecting at all, but he made it super freaking interesting.
Yeah, I don't think I was aware of the show, but I never had time to sit down. I don't have a lot of time to watch YouTube videos.
All right, I'm hanging up on you. You've never watched a single episode of the Non Sequitur show?
No, like even.
Do you even know who I am? Oh wait, I'm sorry. I'm not Matt Dillahunty. Damn it.
But I mean, don't feel bad. Like, there's a bunch of atheists and agnostic and theist shows on YouTube. I haven't really watched a single one of them.
How'd you find out about my paper?
Oh man, there's a whole group of people that don't like you.
Oh well, no, shit, really, what? Stop that! No,
I'm not surprised, Steve.
Well,
Come on, Steve.
Just kind of hurts me a little bit. Just finding this out. Why you got to tell me this and ruin my night?
I think actually, the first time I saw it, though, someone said I should watch a clip from one of your videos, and you had it on there, or you talked about it and had the link in the description or something. And that's when I saw it first, but that's not when I read it. Someone else told me I needed to read it because they wanted me to tear it apart.
Well, of course, yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like I have a lot of people tagged on it too. And it's kind of funny because almost first of all, like I said, I've had people say that the logic was off, and then everybody who knows about logic said, no, don't say that, because the logic actually, they went through and point by point, they made sure. I had Dr. Demi read it, even. Or I didn't have him, but I asked him to. He did, but
that's a good thing. That's a good thing, right?
That the logic, yeah. Well, that's a start, right? I mean,
yeah, that's obviously good that people are looking at it and trying to, hey, what about this?
But the reasoning is odd, though, right, dude? The reasoning is that they want to see my paper, assailed because they dislike me, not because they think the argument's bad. That's kind of BS, But whatever. I mean, look, you deal with hate. You deal with the people that hate all the time. What are you gonna do?
Well, it's about the project. It's about what you're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to put forward, trying to share truth with people. And if they want to provide a contrary perspective, that's okay, but you got to justify it.
Yeah. And Dark emailed me. He was very civil, and he said, hey, I think I may have found some issues I want to talk about. I said, okay, what do you got? He's like, well, it's too much to putting in here one time. And I'm like, okay, how about this? We'll just set it up and we'll have a discussion. That's what I like to do. And it was sight unseen, right?
Yeah, it's more fun that way too, isn't it?
Dark, I did not get a single thing from you as far as like before we went on air. This is totally you're coming at me like new, right? Yeah. So I mean, I think I'm strong enough in this particular argument that I can assail, most arrows thrown my way. But I love the conversation, and that's what I like to talk about. And that's the problem between a lot of people who just want to see like the arguments, blown away. They're not interested in the argument or the discussion or anything. The reason why I wrote this paper to begin with. All they're interested in is, if this paper's assailed, then Steve will be fundamentally destroyed and the evil vanquished from our lands. It's like,
yeah, and that's anti-intellectual.
Absolutely, it is.
The thing is, an atheism is an intellectual argument. So the thing is, you have to approach it from an intellectual level. So people are willing to approach you on an intellectual level, which means the individual has nothing to do with it.
Just be nice. Just be civil and cordial.
What matters is the arguments you put forward.
Yeah,
right?
What used to be that way back in the early days when we had the GDC, it was all about the arguments, and people made it personal. You remember those days?
Supposed to be. It's supposed to be.
But you remember back in the GDC days, the G Plus days, it was all about the discussions, and then people got so in real life and so involved in other people's interpersonal relationships and things of that nature. And I'm like, I'm not into that. By the way,
it's not cool. It's not like, guys, come on, like. The reason why we're putting these arguments forward is that we care about people and we want the world to be
I want people to think.
A place.
I don't want people to be
care
sheep.
about what's true. We want to care about what's
I just watched a video called Sheeple. It's really good. I don't remember the guy who sings it. It's some kind of like rap dude.
Tom McDonald.
Dude, yeah, Tom McDonald. I'm not really into that type of music that much. That video is freaking good, dude. Mm-hmm. That video the lyrics are epic. Yeah, if people haven't heard of that, go watch that. What's his name? Tom what again? It's Tom something.
McDonald.
Tom McDonald. If you guys haven't heard that video called Sheeple, I gotta admit the dude really made some really good points. Straight up. And again, I'm not much into that counterculture kind of music, but it was really good. Landon, by the way, did say that the logic is valid. He did go through it. He wasn't the only ones, but he knows logic pretty well. And so yeah, he went through it. And by the way, I don't know. Hey, Landon, can I mention something about iOS that you have because worked with? Because people were saying that they saw your name on EULA for certain things, which is all public now. But I mean, I don't know if I'm okay to talk about it or not. But they're like, oh my god, I got Landon's name in my pocket. I'll leave that up to Landon if I can bring that up. But yeah, so I mean, this is again, Dark. When people start attacking my paper, and the first thing they say to me, your logic is wrong. You got to realize how much that just affects me, as in like I don't want to talk to this person because I don't think they actually read the paper or understood it.
Oh yeah, I can get that, but I forgot I was going to say this before. So there's this filtering that happens, right? If you're putting something out on the internet, you're pretty much on the internet. No matter what you're going to say, you're going to have a large group of people that think you're wrong.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That's part of the internet, yeah.
But even so, you can hold them accountable for being illogill or fallacious.
Well, just make them show their work.
I think you can, and
yeah,
I think that's
what I'm trying to get at is there's a small, it might be large, but there's a subset of that group that are going to be the extra dumb ones, and those are the ones that are going to come talk to you most of the time. So I don't think you can judge the group that disagree with your paper based solely on the people that are most ready to come and attack you.
Yeah, no, I like I said, yeah, I'm well aware of that. But I'm in Facebook groups all the time where people are attacking my paper, and they're so bad at it. And I tell them, look, and I know I understand this comes across as condescending. I'm okay with this, but I tell them, look, you're just not at a level to really engage me on this particular topic because you don't even know what a valid argument even looks like. Why am I going to spend 2 hours of my time? This is like going after a flat earther saying that the earth is flat. I'm not interested in like that. I want somebody who at least knows what they're talking about. You came in, you knew what you're talking about. And I'm like, oh shit, this guy knows what he's talking about. He might have reasons to think my paper's wrong. There's some interest here. That piqued my interest. I didn't shun you. I didn't go, oh, you're just wrong. I'm like, oh shit, okay, okay, this is great. But what do I do when somebody who like doesn't know, the basics, and they're saying, oh, well, Steve's wrong on his paper, and then when you ask them how's the logic wrong, and they say, oh, by definition. Okay, I'm not going to spend much time with them.
Oh yeah, by definition, that's where they're saying that you're putting the label in the wrong spot.
Right. They're just saying by definition I'm wrong. Even though they also said the logic doesn't follow. I'm like, well, the logic doesn't follow. They don't know what valid means, right? They don't understand.
Well, they should want to be correct if they're going to criticize.
You think?
Right? Like they should want that to be the case, that they are being correct if they are criticizing you, right? So like, these things have to play forward. They have to be a part of the conversation. Like, you can disagree, but if you disagree and you want to engage, then you're responsible for the argumentation that you put forward, because you're doing this. You're like, did you make money out of publishing your paper, Steve?
No,
you didn't. You did it
not a dime,
because you care about that form of expression of doing this type of the thing. And so you hope and you expect that other people, if they're going to come and try to discredit you or say that you are incorrect, that they also care about being honest, about making sure they have a good argument put forward. And there's nothing wrong with expecting that, and you should absolutely expect it.
Thank you. And that's what I do. And that's why in these Facebook groups, they're like, oh, well, I've already shown your paper's wrong. I'm like, no, you have not. Stop it. And they think that I'm the bad guy. And this is where, Dark, people, that don't like me, they're the ones that I tell this to, and they take it personally. And they're like, oh, Steve's a mean man. We've already refuted his work. He just won't accept it. And it's like, well, no, you haven't. And if you had, then I'll accept it. And I'll be like, okay, crap. Let me see if I can first shore it up, right? Most of the time you try to fix an argument. You try to buttress it, which is fine. Because before I put the paper on Academic EDU, I had a lot of eyes on this paper. Give me some very good suggestions of how to shore it up, So, by the way, so Landon, so he says it's fine. So, if you guys, if anybody who has an Apple phone probably has Landon's name in their pocket, because he actually worked on the Apple iOS and he's part of the the EULA. And so millions of people right now have Landon in their pocket. Somebody was telling me.
It's his fault people are overpaying for.
Right, $1,300 for an iPhone. I had a lady lose one the other day. She left her iPhone somewhere, and luckily I found it. But I was just like, holy crap, $1,300 phone just like left around. Yeah, prices are extraordinary high. It's so funny. I remember $1,500.
Isn't that crazy,
dude? For $1,500, you used to get a brick phone. These were analog phones. They weren't even digital. They were analog brick phones, and they were had this big old long antenna. They were monstrosities back in the 1986, I guess it was, and it was $1,500, which was expensive as hell. Now for $1,500, you get this, like you get a computer on your hand. It's like the other thing, you just had the ability to talk. Now you get a full-fledged computer. Is basically what a phone is. So
yeah, well, you know what? If you can plug it into a monitor and it functions that way, that's pretty cool. But like, if all you're doing is hauling it around with you and all that, I don't get it. I think people are crazy.
I wouldn't spend that kind of money for one. Hell no.
I have a dumb phone. I don't bother with that shit. That's fucking nuts, man.
I like my dumb phones. I had a Motorola V60 for ages. I thought it was a good little flip phone.
Yeah, it does the trick.
Yeah,
you just want to be able to answer phone calls and that.
In fact, the flip phones were more. Flip phones are actually easier to talk to people too than these rectangular phones. I think.
Yeah,
but
that's actually a good point.
Yeah,
my flip phone had the best reception of any smartphone I've had.
Yep, I love my flip phone. I mean, I had no problem with calls and but whatever.
Yeah,
blame Landon.
Thing.
Yeah, Landon's fault.
I was forced a few years ago to finally get a smartphone because I switched jobs and I needed to look at email all the time.
Yeah.
Oh boy!
So I have a tablet.
I get that.
I could do that on my tablet. But anyways, back to this real quick. So let's kind of wrap it up. So I mean, like, I don't know where to kind of go. I mean, no offense, I don't think you assailed the argument. Well, you brought up really valid and interesting points. Some of which obviously I've considered before. But I just think it's really a vantage point thing. If you're looking at it from external, you're looking from internal. My paper really is more for external. But even if there's some internal issues, it just goes to me. You talk about axiological value. There's no axiological value to call non-theist atheist. But if you do, mazel tov, knock yourself out. My argument, though, Dark, is just they shouldn't make everybody else follow that, right? They shouldn't say you must be this, you must use it our way. That's when I draw the line, because I'm not saying they have to use terms my way. I'm just saying that it's advantageous to if they want to understand the topic better, but they're forcing me to use their terminology, and that's where the difference rises. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah. That's actually I don't like. I'm not worried about like really where they want to put the words at, like on the square, or what definition they have. That my real only criticism of them is that we don't have to use your words.
Yeah. And so we were actually surprised that my paper wasn't as bad as what I mean. Some people, I don't know anybody said that anybody that knew what they're talking about said it was bad, but
yeah. Well, if it's a semantic thing, that certainly doesn't have so much of you made a big error here,
right,
type of a mentality.
Well, like any paper, except for you don't.
Semantics.
Right. I mean, my paper doesn't make some kind of massive metaphysical conclusion that must hold true in all possible worlds. It's an argument, just like anything else.
Absolutely.
I can't speak to the more fervent people you've probably talked to in the past.
I've had some winners.
Amongst the people that I got around to looking at it from, I'm pretty sure the assumption seemed to be that it was an internal critique, and that's why they all think your argument's wrong.
Oh, no, it's more of an external. Yeah, Landon, what say you? By the way, welcome.
Thank you very much. So again, as I said, the logic of your argument is sound, right? And also you refer back to the diagram that you and I wrote. The fundamental logic is solid, right? And in some ways, as you say with those diagrams, you can plug in other things. Like I took the diagram we wrote and had, do you believe that Darth Vader is real? Right? You can add it to any sort of system. Problem, I think, is when you move from pure logic to semantics and language.
Mm-hmm.
Then that when you bridge that thing, now you get into fuzzy words and connotations that trip you up. It's one of the reasons why, for example, in physics, we try to rely on the mathematics rather than a linguistic description, because things like quantum mechanics don't linguistically make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, but I see that sometimes what happens with Steve's paper is that, Steve leads them along the logical path. They get to a conclusion they don't like,
Yeah.
and they say so, and then react. And in the reaction, sometimes is
because they think there has to be a mistake, right? They have to
Yep.
they have to preserve their bias, and so they say there has to be a mistake in here. Where is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or Steve, they say Steve is a poo-poo head, or
That's always a good defeater.
Yeah,
or
you're
some
a
other,
poo-poo head.
some other logical fallacy. So it's sad, because what Steve's argument should just be is like, okay, fine, move on.
I think they underestimated me, dude. Honestly, I don't think any of
They
them
are,
thought.
dude.
I don't think
You
any of
know
them
they
thought
are.
that I was capable of producing a paper like this, even though I knew that I. And by the way, this funny is, this paper the core wrote itself over a period of like 3 days. It flowed. It just naturally flowed. And so that I found to be very interesting. The fix, making sure that it was all technically correct, that was time consuming. But as far as the argument itself, it was like writing itself, which means to me, I was doing something right, because people will say when they write a song, it just flows out of them kind of stuff. This just kind of flowed for me. I know what they mean by that, because I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to go here. It was just kind of naturally progressive, because that's how the logic worked.
Yeah. It's as erudites would say, that it's a proof in the book, right? It just flows narratively. The thing I think, Steve, you should do is write another paper on the commentary of your paper.
You keep telling me
right?
that, and I should. I know.
And because on a commentary you can be less
rigid,
symbolically precise, and talk about the meaning, and you can also mention some of the suggestions.
Yeah,
I wouldn't call them criticisms, although technically they are. Some things that people have suggested that you might.
Yeah. We're talking. Dark brings some really good points. I mean, I probably should be a little more specific on the internal and external factors when I'm critiquing stuff. And of course I'm cognizant of that. I really am. And it's a good point to be made. It doesn't defeat the paper, but it's certainly a good point. And
the word critique doesn't mean they found something wrong.
Right.
Ha ha ha. It's a suggestion. So one of my critiques for you, Steve, is you need to write about the paper and discuss things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And also perhaps in that commentary you can discuss some of the arguments that have been brought up that have failed.
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful. The commentary in the paper would be helpful for people trying to understand, well, wait a minute, I got to a conclusion I don't like. What's wrong?
Yeah.
And if they're trying to figure out what went wrong,
well,
your commentary can help them.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And obviously it's been read. I mean, this 1,400 views for a paper from somebody that said nobody in philosophy, that's actually a lot of views.
Yeah. That's
a lot.
That's great. Well, and beyond just changing the semantic, or like adding sentences, trying to help people feel more comfortable with what you're trying to say to understand what you're trying to argue for, you can also give resources or sources, linking people to the definition or the thing you're trying to help them to understand. Now, the thing is, this can go on for infinity.
Yeah,
so
how much information you want to put in, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So just go to the level that you feel comfortable with, that makes you feel like you've made your argument. And then if people have a problem with it, it's like, look, you're just an asshole.
Yeah. I do want to write another one, but I want to write it.
Really want to understand what I'm saying.
I want to write it on the whole agnostic atheism thing on a technical level, like I did this paper. But even my paper, was an essay. It wasn't a paper, but my essay, by definition, it had some technical stuff in there. But I mean, I think that not a lot of people they didn't read it. It doesn't have anywhere near the amount of views. But when people are saying, "Hey, Steve, what do you mean by prescriptive and descriptive?" That essay that I wrote describes that. It explains it in great detail what I mean by it, which can be used to understand my initial paper.
Well, Steve, ask them to reiterate what you said. It's like, okay, So you disagree with an argument in my paper. Okay, reiterate to me that
They
portion
can't tell
that
me.
you disagree
They
with.
can't tell me what my argument
Then
is.
it's like, sorry, you're
Yeah,
not as
Dark.
smart as
Dark
you
is the
think you
first
are.
guy that I've
You
talked
know,
to in
it's not-
ages that actually
you
understands
don't,
the argument.
deserve to have a conversation if you're not going to be specific.
If you
right?
guys don't mind, there's a I guess maybe a criticism in the chat that I didn't challenge enough. But if you don't mind, can I throw a dumpster on this fire?
Yeah, go nuts.
Okay. If I went back and explained to all the other people that got me onto this that a more precise title for your paper should be "My words don't match your words, and here's where they don't," would that be a fair explanation of what your paper says?
No, not at all.
No. It probably people's disagreement comes out of that thing, but that's not what his paper is about.
Right. My paper is really showing if this is the route that people want to go, what actually happens here. When we start using terms to be so watered down, they become axiologically devalued, where you have people that it used to be when somebody says they're an atheist, you knew what they meant. Now it's not so much the case, right? It's devalued the usage of that word, I think. I don't know why atheists wanted that. It never made sense to me. I've not had an atheist explain to me why it makes sense to do that, except for demographic and voting reasons. Okay, that's one positive thing that they can say about it, and I accept that. But does it overcome the negative things? I don't think so. And so, when they're trying to change word usages where atheism is a lot more vacuous than what it used to be, or a lot more at least ambiguous. I don't know why atheists want to do that. I don't know why atheists are not out there loud and proud going, hey, I'm an atheist. There is no God. Let me explain to you why, and then give atheist arguments as to why they believe there's no God. I want to see more of that. I enjoy those conversations.
Because if someone asks me, am I an atheist? I have to almost respond, I don't understand your question.
What do you mean?
Because
I
don't know what you mean by atheist.
But it wasn't like that before the 70s.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not sure why people thought that was a good idea to descend into, but
because they accepted Flu's argument. But even in Flu's paper, by Dark, have you read Flu's original paper?
I don't think. No.
Presumption of atheism.
I've read something. I've been shared stuff from Flu, but I don't know if it's that paper.
Okay. Well, his most seminal paper was the presumption of atheism. But it was never well received. And he even admits in that paper, he says that the common understanding of the word atheism is somebody who believes that God does not exist, but I want it understood in the negative. I want people to understand it as somebody who does not believe God exists. He's arguing for a lesser usage. That's just what his paper was about. My paper was to refute his paper, saying that this is why we shouldn't have that usage. So it wasn't an internal critique of like the ACA. My paper was literally a refutation of Flu's paper. That's exactly what it was. So so when people are saying, well, it's some kind of weird, internal critique of the ACA, no, it had nothing to do with the ACA. They're just, unfortunately, followers of Flu's paper. But my paper was literally, if you read the conclusion, is that we reject Flu's argument. But now you have two arguments out there: Flu's argument and my argument. Which one people accept?
So I'm trying to remember. So he makes a case that you should use this word this way.
Yes.
But as far as the presumption goes, is he's basically saying the presumption is non-theism.
Yeah, and he actually in his own paper contradicts himself. He actually uses atheism in the positive case as well, but he wants atheism and non-theism to be synonymous, where there's no change of the truth value in a proposition if you instantiate one with the other. When we're going back to those, transparency and opacity. If I say, it used to be if I said, hey, Landon is a non-theist, okay, that's the truth, right? Nobody would question that, right? And if I said Landon is an atheist, there's some discrepancies there. That's not necessarily a true statement, but according to the ACA, it would still hold true. And that's the problem, because it's not longer true. That's a false statement now.
But when I read your paper, I didn't get the impression that you can't make that sound to match that definition. That's not what came to mind from reading your paper.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. What do you mean?
Well,
expand on that.
It didn't come across as an argument of you make wrong sound. Mm-hmm. It came across as an argument of if you make those sounds, then you're you're collapsing two logically separate positions.
Oh, I get you. Okay, so
into one position.
Okay, so here's the thing: if you make those sounds connote information, right? And so when I say something like non-theist, it connotes to somebody that they're not in the set of theist.
Yeah.
And actually, in that particular case, it might even be a little more denoting, because it might, if I say non-theist, that is this literally meaning the set of all things that are not theist.
Yeah. And the problem, of course, is that things like not, non, and anti have very specific meanings in some cases, but in the normal vernacular,
Completely
have
different. Yeah.
very vague meanings.
Anti-hero is not a villain.
Yes.
You know, but here's the thing. But Len, if I say, like, go back to, and it had to come up sometime before the end of the year, guys. Sorry, live chat. This had to come up, so prepare yourself. But if I say a rock is a non-theist, nobody should balk at that, because rocks are not a theist. That's fine. Logically, they're non-theist. But when we use the term non-theist, we generally are using it to describe a person, right? But it's, again, the way we use semantics and the way we use logic, as Landon pointed out, are not necessarily always, going to dovetail together. Does it make sense to say rock is a non-theist? Sure, logically, but that's not how we use the word, right? Because yes. And so, and it makes even worse sense to say, oh, rocks are atheist, because that's not how we use the word. And in my paradigm, it would be nonsensical to say.
Well, rocks are certainly probably not anti-theist.
Well, to them, anti-theist means believes God does not exist, right? So they've changed the words atheist, they've changed the word agnostic, and they changed the word anti-theist, all to suit their paradigm.
Yeah. So in mathematics, we use symbology to try to avoid some of these linguistic problems, right? And the same thing why in physics we try to rely on the mathematics, because many times our everyday common usage is vague enough that it's difficult to drive to a precise conclusion, right? And that's one of the reasons why mathematics is often a tool of some sciences. But
even math had to be built up. I mean, going back to the original, think how complicated it was just to prove 1 + 1 = 2. I mean, when was Moore, was it Whitehead and Russell, right? On Principia Mathematica, 3 volumes of this that nobody in the right mind would read. I mean, when I was looking at that, there was, as far as I knew, 6 people that actually read their entire work. 6 people.
And no, what's happened is that people have taken theorem provers and gone through their works and made minor corrections on the thing. But remember, one of the things, and this is very important, one of the things that came out of that was that Gödel came around and essentially
screw their lives
knocked the
Yeah.
pillars out from under.
Yeah.
And in fact, what came out of it was that any set of axioms that are capable enough to describe real numbers have to either be contradictory, that lead to contradictions, or insufficient to describe the truth.
You could never have an axiom set that you can prove all truths.
Yes, or you have an axiom set that leads to contradiction.
Right, but Russell and was it Whitehead or Moore? Was that his name? What was his name? Remember?
Well, Whitehead was involved in it. Moore was also involved in that whole movement to try and Church was another person
to do this more to do this really formalism. They wanted this It was sort of a notion of they thought, well, let's bring mathematics down to bare right
things, and then the work was never completed.
No, it took 10 years too,
and
it's still never completed.
Was published with it.
It's complicated
because they realized they weren't going to get anywhere, right? And in fact, what mathematics proved that it is insufficient.
Yeah, well, I think they gave up once Gödel proved that they couldn't make a system with formalized the way they wanted.
Yeah, and so the result is that there are true statements that can't be proven, or there are statements that you can't tell whether they're true or false.
Right.
But that doesn't stop mathematics. It just says that some problems may be so hard that you don't know whether they exist in a problem of provable or non-provable. That's
And here's the thing, Lan. I love when people say.
that's-
I tell people like, yeah, Landon, you said that my paper is valid too, and they're like, oh, well, what does Landon know? Okay, let's go there. I was like, okay, you want to show Landon's look, because if they show me wrong, they show you wrong by extension, right? And so it's okay. Look, why are you worried about proving me wrong on the logic, guys? If you can prove Landon wrong, that's a much bigger feather in your cap.
The more fruitful way to try to attack your position is to try to attack the linkage between the logic and the term.
Yeah, well, of course. Yeah.
Right. That would be if you're going to try to find a problem.
Yeah,
it's the easiest too.
I agree.
Yeah.
But not many people have even got that far, dude.
So it is. Yeah. But again, that's the thing that mathematics knows that it's insufficient. So, but that just sort of says, well, you pick your axioms and you do your best, and you in some cases try to stick to formal language, recognizing when you go to informal, you are losing something in translation.
Yep.
And that's, I think, is what happens to your argument, Steve, is that when you bridge from the formal to the informal, and people don't like where you've led them to, they rebel. And
but I would the opposite. I bridged from the informal to the formal.
Sure,
because I formalized the shit out of this.
Oh yeah, I guess I would say that you started with you showed in a formal area a problem,
mm-hmm.
and then applied it to this problem of atheist theist.
Yeah, it really boils down to just, you want to accept flues or you want to accept that flu's wrong. I mean, it's just, and even then there's other papers out there arguing against flu, but it's really what schema do you want to go by? And I'm not even arguing one schema is right or wrong. I had somebody like go to my video the other day and they're like, oh, you're saying your thing is right, everybody else's schema is wrong. That's never what I argued. My argument has always been, if you accept a certain schemas, these are things that's going to be leading into, but right and wrong are value judgments as far as like moral statements. Yeah. And I don't use those terms to say, oh, well, your schema is wrong. That would make no sense. I could say, if you're using your schema, this follows naturally out of it. And if you say something else, that could be wrong based upon your schemas if you're doing it internal. But I'm not going to say that like the ACA schema is wrong. It's just, to me, axiologically less valuable. That's a huge distinction to be made, because people keep telling me, oh, Steve says that, the ACA schema is wrong. It's like, no, the way they're wording it is wrong when they say that their schema is the only one, or it must be a metaphysical necessity. That's wrong. There's no way out of that.
And
then you put forward your argument.
Yeah, right. And my argument shows that when they say that, it's wrong. But if you just say, hey, if the ACA and Matt Dillahunty's of the world just said, look, this is how we use these terms. I understand in philosophy they're used differently, which Matt has said, actually. And Steve is correct, there would never been a problem, but they would never give me that credit. If they said Steve is correct using his schema, it's logically coherent, it is basically normative how it is philosophy, that's fine. We don't use it that way. We use it our own way. How do you argue against that? You could still maybe argue which one's more beneficial. Sure, I'm down for that. But they're not saying that. They're literally saying Steve is wrong. Matt Dillahunty says Steve's wrong. What am I wrong about, though? I don't think even Dark has said that I'm wrong. I think it's more, there's some nuances here. But I mean, as far as what I've been saying from my own view from philosophy, Dark, would you agree that philosophically speaking, this paper falls in line with philosophy, does it not? I mean, what is wrong about the paper?
Oh, I mean, I don't know enough on the subject to know if it falls in line exactly. But that's just my.
All right, arguendo. Let's make the assumption that philosophically speaking, this is generally the norm. Would you agree, though, this would just be relating to what people actually understand in philosophy? Then there's nothing wrong with the paper. Yeah. So this is why people were saying that my paper is unassailable, because again, if you follow it, if the logic's correct and you assume the premises are true, you have to kind of conclude that obviously by local necessity, the conclusion's true, right? If it's valid and sound, the conclusion's true. That's by logic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I think if you put a tagline or a subtitle that says this is not an internal critique, almost all of your argument with people would go away.
Why couldn't they just ask me?
Well, people on the internet, they're not going to do that.
Oh, okay.
It's not going to happen.
They lack courage.
Yeah.
So Steve, you've gotten pushback from some people the so-called atheist community. Have you received criticism from people in theist community?
No, I don't
Right?
think.
Are there like fundamental theists that
No, but the thing is funny is that a lot of these theists, I know they agree with my work, but unfortunately, and I know this is going to sound arrogant. I don't mean to be. I don't think they understand the argument even to the point where they could really kind of go over it. That's why they don't kind of run it, because they would have to defend the argument. And I don't know a lot of theists that could. Maybe I just haven't talked to them. But as you know, Logic Only Zone pointed out, you have somebody say, "Can you tell me what my argument is?" Very few people can tell me what my argument is. I know Dark
they
can.
better be able to.
Yeah.
If they're claiming to understand it and say there's something wrong with it.
But none of them can. Very few people can. It doesn't and I'm not going to tell them how to do it.
They're not capable. The thing is, you have to show that you're capable and you're being forthright and you care about what is being shared. That, hey, I've understood this, and these are the things I'm concerned about, and I want to understand that deeper.
Yeah.
Or this is my contrary to that, and then if I'm incorrect, please explain to me what that is about. People are making this far too much a personal issue.
Right. They want this about me.
This is about me.
If Landon wrote this, dude, if Landon wrote,
it's about this is about information. This is about capacity to argue. This is about what the truth is.
Yeah,
we're trying to get to the truth.
If Landon wrote this argument, they wouldn't be as hostile toward him.
No, I mean, I would try to help people understand the import of this, perhaps better, and anticipate the attacks. But that would be knowing what Steve went through.
Yeah, right.
And to address that. But still, Steve, you also ran into a problem that you ran into some cult of personality problems as well, which is
on the internet. That never happens.
I'm just
Dark came in thinking in here that I was going to be some royal a-hole to him or something. I don't know. I mean, I don't know the names of the people that he hangs out with, but I mean, I can assume. But even still, people. I always tell people this: just have a conversation with me. Kawasa 5001 says, brutally honest, I think most theist interests are lingering around. Oh, look, he's attacking atheists. That's good. Probably. No, and again, I hold atheists a higher standard because as a non-believer, they're in my tribe. They're in my camp. I get that. We're all non-believers here. So I don't want non-believers to go against theists and look like a complete idiot. It just drives me nuts.
Well, it's a.
Oh, you're muted, Logic.
Well, I'm kind of like a universal consciousness type of a guy, type of a thing. Like, I'm not really sure, but I'm definitely an atheist. There's no like God. Type of thing.
Yeah. And by the way, I'll take an edible and I'll think I'll understand the universe a lot better. It's weird. It does open your mind.
Likely you would.
No, I know I have. No, I literally I have. I could tell you from experience. I have been thinking about things that I just would never have thought about before. Just 10 milligrams THC indica. Oh my God.
Every once in a while, it's not such a bad experiment.
Yeah, no, it's not. And it's just, I literally have been thinking, and I'm going to have an episode on this too, because I was like, okay, what can I talk about? And there's certain things that I want to talk about. And one of the conversations that we'd be having is going to be immortality, about living forever. What it'd be like to be having an eternal consciousness forever. That could be actually construed as hell.
Actually, I have some theories and arguments related to that. So if you want to do a whole episode around that, I'd be happy.
Yeah, I mean, think about this, man. I think it actually, death means, to me, it seems to be almost like beneficial to people. Like,
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking, what would it be like to live forever?
When it's you.
Oh my God, that'd be hell.
It's beneficial. Yeah. Right? Like, okay, finally I can rest.
Yeah, but here's the thing I want to bring up on one of these shows. If you don't exist, if there is such a thing as an internal critique, because what is there to internalize if it doesn't exist? But a non-existence to you and non-existence to the universe would be indistinguishable.
That's true.
So I mean, think about this: non-existence from your point of view before you were even born. The universe may have existed, but is there how is it from an internal or external critique? Would you even have such a thing to visualize existence if you don't exist to even be the visualizer or the the person who's observing? This whole gets into the whole thing with the Copernicus principle and a preferred frame of reference and the observer. It's like the universe seems to actually only have a context if it's observed. If the universe is never observed by anybody, it seems to be meaningless. And this gets into the axiological value. And I wish I was so stoned right now. But these are the things I've been thinking about lately. And they get into some very deep thoughts. And so maybe we should just get stoned one night and have deep thoughts.
Yeah. But I'm thinking from forever, from the point of view of physics, has some problems because, at least if our understanding of physics is reasonably correct, the universe is not very kind to forever.
Yeah,
right?
well, it'd be one big black hole eventually. It'd be,
That's true.
But
you do have the first law of thermodynamics. Nothing is created or destroyed. It just changes form.
It just becomes bland.
Well,
it's homogenized.
Stay in a state of constant.
No, the universe would eventually have heat death and the maximum low of the highest entropy, and then black holes would take over. But what would it be like to be a conscious?
It keeps going in some facet or form. It's kind of curious.
But we have a conscious, right? And I again, when we do a show on this, I'm going to talk about the mind-body problem again, and the major issues resulting in. I think it's unresolvable at this point. I don't even know how somebody's going to resolve the mind-body problem. And it leads into the consciousness of the universe. And so it does make sense to say that the universe only has value because we are there to observe it.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to hold off my potential theories.
Okay.
And then maybe we can do.
Yeah. No, we'll sandbox it because again, I'm not beholden to any one position on this.
I think I got
some deep stuff there.
Yeah.
And I admit I don't understand consciousness. It's not something I understand. But if consciousness has its basis in physics, then if the universe tends towards what they call a heat death, where essentially there is very little to nil energy differential between
there's no consciousness,
then you don't have any really useful state transitions, or if you do, they run at such low speeds that they're useless. Now, that isn't to say that there isn't something like some kind of cosmology that cycles in on itself. But then who's to say that the consciousness process would survive a crunch and re-big bang? Again, we don't know.
Yeah,
so,
time.
Yeah, there's
completely
definitely
different
things we don't know. Like we can just hypothesize about what's going on.
But I admit, first of all, that I don't understand consciousness. And secondly, we only have, hypotheses regarding the fate of the universe. But we know a lot more than we did, 50 or even 500 years ago. So,
and I think the more we learn, the more we realize maybe it is hopeless. Maybe it is absurdism. I'm not going to ever be nihilistic. I don't think I could ever be nihilistic.
No,
I think that's too. I think that's too far. But I think absurdism has some value to it. But I certainly think that we might just be so limited by our biological constraints of our mind that there's just certain questions our minds cannot process the answers to.
Or even when questions whether or not life on this planet it would be able to propagate itself to some other place in the universe and find a new home because we have a limited lifespan.
But even then, how would that even function? The biological biodome would be so different in form of the organism. We're so dependent upon bacteria and lower life forms in our world that if we went to a world that was completely different in life forms, how would we integrate with that? How would we?
I would presume if you survive if you survive for any period of time in a different place, you have brought some subset of the biosphere with you.
Sure,
you die otherwise, and then that biosphere would evolve.
You'd have to terraform the planet using your own internal biodome.
Not terraform, but you can also have your own bubble, right? But
But I don't want to live in a bubble. I want to be able to grow out in the grass, whatever the planets they call it, on that planet.
Also, we have to throw a biosphere bubble. But,
the internet is like living in your own bubble.
But here's the thing.
So,
we're all shut in.
Fair point.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. If life exists on the Earth, that means that the laws of physics have to allow for it. I think, again, we're going to just go by reasonable entailment.
It has to be put into the set of rules or
Right,
laws,
right,
or anything
right.
like that.
It would
Like,
follow.
It's
It'd follow.
inherently a piece of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we exist. Therefore, the rules, something in the rules of physics, have to allow for consciousness. They have to allow for our existence.
Yeah,
But why is it only on this
exactly.
planet? Why is it the rules set up that we can only so far find it on this planet? It should be on all planets. Any or any planet that's in a habitable zone. We should find life teeming places.
And
it's like a progressive thing. Like it moves forward. It's almost like there's these set of rules or something like that really extraneously conflicts against the emergence of consciousness, really pushing it back as far as it can until
it does
it's ready
emerge,
for
and then in
something
5
like
billion
that.
years of evolution, it finally emerges. And so what? But if the laws of physics allow for it, again, how is it we are the only known conscious beings in existence?
Well, that's
definitely
simply
a good
because,
question.
but that's simply because
philosophy, dude.
To detect our ability to detect life elsewhere is right now very limited. Right? We've are in a situation now where the possibility where life might evolve or could exist is much larger than our ability to explore.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're that's one of the things I think that's happened in the last quarter century is we've gone from planets being potentially we thought were rare or special to they're more common than stars.
Mm-hmm.
And so like in our galaxy of around 200 stars, there's at least 1 trillion planets bound to stars. And so the general combinations that you can have, and they're running all kinds of varieties, shapes and sizes and conditions. So the combinations are there that would suggest, but not prove, that there's a wide variety of conditions that could be similar to Earth or different, but still self-replicating.
Yeah, and life could exist there. And all we need to do is find one planet that has a conscious society, because we're the only species on Earth that is conscious in that way, right?
However, to detect those is very difficult. I mean, we're barely able to detect the existence of a planet, let alone trying to understand. Now things like the James Webb Space Telescope have amazing spectroscopy in the mid-infrared regions.
Oh, the mid-infrared is amazing.
To detect gas quantities in other planets, but that itself won't prove it. That might say, here's a planet that has interesting chemical stuff going on in its atmosphere, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's life.
I think we're stagflated though until we reach the stars, or at least until we meet an alien race that has consciousness. Until when we have that happen, we'll be leaps and bounds in progress as far as science and philosophy. But until then, I think we're stagnated.
Well, wouldn't it be fabulous? We're like the first consciousness emerging species. Wouldn't that be fabulous?
It had to be someone. It had to be someone.
There's got to be another planet out there. It's been bajillions of years.
Right, but think about that logic.
There's definitely somebody out there.
But think about that. Consciousness had to emerge. And again, I'm not going to get the complexities about simultaneity and time, but
I am saying this should be its whole.
Yeah, but I mean, the first planet to have developed a consciousness, that's a huge question,
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, it's within our reference, because when you're talking about like special relativity and simultaneity and when things happen, it gets really complicated. I mean, it's like
it does.
It's like holy crap.
But the thing is that again, if our model of how the Earth formed is reasonably correct, and it seems to be, the universe was 9.3 billion years after the Big Bang when the Earth began to form.
Mm-hmm.
So there's plenty of time for stuff, and we are seeing with the Webb well-developed galaxies far back in time, much farther than we originally had guessed. So the Earth is by no means early on in the universe had evolved for almost more than twice the age of the Earth. The universe was evolving from the Big Bang before the Earth even was formed. So to me, there's plenty of opportunities if the Earth is even rare, just given the vastness of space, it's something that's happened. However, the problem is detecting it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's kind of the bad news, I think. Given our age and our expected lifetime, it is unlikely that we'll be able to detect a civilization, send it a message, and have it respond, assuming relativity is correct. Relativity is correct, and c is the maximum speed of causality, and you're going faster. Then even if you're going to live another 100 years,
let's say on Alpha, Proxima,
50 light years out and back is the region which you can have a barely ping-pong type conversation.
Well, you know what, like considering that consciousness is an emergent property of the universe, wouldn't you think that the universe may potentially be conscious enough to realize that they put civilizations too close to another civilization, that they'd probably fucking all kill each other?
Now, if panpsychism is true,
the civilizations
xenophobia in space.
Panpsychism is making a resurgence, by the way. And actually, panpsychism is not as bizarre as people make it out to be, and I don't accept it. But I mean, it would resolve a lot of problems.
Wait, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't we have issue identifying consciousness on Earth?
Be self-aware. I mean, as far as the ability to do certain high executive functions.
Right.
I mean,
we're talking about awareness.
We accept that animals are aware. They're they have some kind of awareness. They have some kind of consciousness, but they are not. They're not the ability to think the way we do. Right? We're a lot more self-aware than any other species.
Yeah. Now, but of course, according to some people, rocks are aware enough to declare themselves atheists. So.
Oh yeah, their panpsychism is true. That actually follows. Yeah. So that's not.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's ridiculous to say that we aware, because I can hear the words you guys are saying. I'm thinking about what you're saying. I'm responding, using language. These are linguistic tools that we've agreed upon signify certain things. So we have a way of connecting with each other. So this is something that we don't find in anything else in nature.
Right.
So it's definitely an incredible phenomenon that definitely deserves our attention, our reflection, and understanding. But it's true that we don't understand why it's there or what it is exactly, but we are experiencing.
Yes.
So it's definitely there.
And as someone in chat,
unless you're a solipsist,
to clarify, well, I don't think it is likely anyone in a lifetime will experience a conversation with somebody out there. It is quite likely that we will detect life elsewhere. The signals have come.
Yeah.
Well, that would be a huge step too.
And I predict the first claims are going to be controversial. Some of them actually might be debunked. But eventually, I think given people's age, I think it's plausible that in your lifetime we will have scientific evidence that there is life elsewhere.
Dude, all it would take to have a huge, just massive paradigm shift is to find life even on Mars that we can determine did not come from the Earth. I mean, we're talking non DNA, or at least in a completely different, triple helical DNA or something that's completely, we know that it did not evolve from Earth. It emerged independently. That would be massive. But again, if the laws of physics are set up to allow for DNA, and allow for the complexities that are in the cell, because again, I'm not getting the intelligent design aspect of it, but I don't think we should crap over intelligent designs outright. I think there's a lot of philosophy there to be really investigated. I don't think it points to an intelligent designer, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about the complexities of things and what they would philosophically mean, because again, if we found life that had a completely different structure, that would be just mind blowing, because then the consciousness isn't dependent upon our own biological features. It can rise by other means.
Right, and methodology to how the universe functions doesn't signify a god or a guiding force. It's almost like things have to have some sort of balance to them for anything to emerge out of it at all. So it's almost like there are certain properties to things, like you can't have water without hydrogen and oxygen. You gotta. These things have to come together in a certain way in order for them to be the they are.
And you can have a very, very wide variety of definition of what is life. That's one of the things that astrobiology struggles with or is working on is defining what life is. Just that physics suggests that things like carbon are so universal that they're really good at building complex molecules. And if you want something which has an imperfect replication process that can evolve, right? And then you probably will have something that's carbon based, or perhaps silicon based, or something that
But
form just the way the physics works.
I understand the reason behind carbon. I do understand the affinities and the orbitals and the valence and all that, and why it's so easy to combine with other things. But I mean, but why does it exist in the first place? That's because of philosophy. Why is there such an element, carbon, that makes life possible as we know it?
Yeah, it's almost like there's something ingrained
physics.
to the atoms where it has to combine with it.
Yeah,
and like out of that random combining and so forth, something will happen, and then here we are. You know what I mean?
I mean, if you say, well, life has evolved atoms, and when you get to 6 protons together in order to be stable, you need 6, 7 or 8 neutrons, but typically stable, you want 6 or 7 neutrons, so you get carbon 12. And given how stars do things, carbon 12 is that carbon is actually a fairly common element in the scheme of things, along with oxygen. So out of physics you get carbon 12, and out of the way it does its orbitals, you then get very complex.
Right? No, we all get that from the physics, but
you couldn't build life through another element.
But the philosophy is the question. Is like, isn't it pretty interesting that the way carbon and oxygen and nitrogen all work together to make life? I mean, if you took,
it's almost like they have to.
Yeah,
like there's something that causes them, so they have to.
Remove one of them, you can't have life as we know it.
They have to combine.
To me, that comes just from the physics. It's sort of like saying, well, isn't it amazing that 2 is the only even prime number? Well, this is the way the numbers work. Saying, I don't understand. I don't understand.
Because there's an ontological aspect. Numbers are abstract. But now we're talking about an actual ontological change, something that has affected the universe. The universe has to have certain things to allow for us to exist. It has to be. But numbers are all abstract in their head. And by the way, like I said, going on your axioms, you can formulate different theories of numbers. But here in reality, what would be? How could you devise a universe where you can have life that you took out any one of those elements? Nobody's been able to do that, obviously.
Because again, in this universe, as we understand it, carbon is a good way to make complex molecules. This isn't to say that there couldn't be some life that was non-carbon. I would not deny that you could. Let's say you had some place that somehow was carbon poor, right? Mm-hmm. Had almost no carbon. Could life evolve? Well, my guess is it would evolve. If it did, it had to evolve in a very different chemical process.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with
that.
It'd
be totally different.
Yeah. Isn't this what the Wolfram project is? You ever heard of the Wolfram project?
I know Wolfram Alpha.
I mean, I know that
it's being made by the same guy that did Wolfram Alpha.
Machine stuff, where he's trying to that's sort of a different
for artificial intelligence.
No, I'm not talking about that. He's doing a project where they're trying to map all possible sets of rules from all possible perspectives. So in theory, if all the scientists working on it get it completed and it functions, he would be able to answer the question, how many possible ways could you have a universe function to create life?
My concern is he will arrive at some Gödelian problem. I think he will. I think the notion of you can build up a system, and I know that Stephen Wolfram is really big in the universe as a state machine, and you just understand the rules of life, and you can produce reality. I think the problem is, I think reality is not that kind, and I think you'll find that if you try to reduce it to some set of fundamental principles, you will run into contradictions or things you can't explain. Now, I don't know in physics if that's the case, because this is a controversial set. I mean, we know mathematics is incomplete, but the question is physics capable of being described perfectly?
Well, what he's I'm not a mathematician. Mm-hmm. From what I understand, though, is he's not checking it against physics or biology or anything. It's a pure mathematical description of sets of rules.
I say that is probably doomed to the same problem that people like Church and Russell and Whitehead ran into when they tried to formalize all mathematics.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think mathematics suggests that is a fool's errand. It might prove something interesting. They might not finish it, but they might derive some useful stuff. Because again, once Gödel's theorem and Euclid's theorem came about, it wasn't the end of mathematics. In fact, it was a dawn of a whole new age of stuff.
But it did kill formalism to a certain extent.
Well, it killed people who wanted to build the mathematics of the machine. Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So there isn't some machine. Well, big deal, right?
Yeah.
The universe is not kind to being able to understand everything.
Yep, and that's something I think we recognize by our own, epistemic limitations. That there are just certain things, there's certain truths that we're not ever going to be able to know. I mean, and mathematics has proved that.
Yeah, but if you step out of mathematics and talk about something concrete, from the abstract to concrete, do you think physics is capable of describing everything in the universe?
No, I don't. I don't think that.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't. There's just certain things that whether either physics breaks down or it's just we don't have the ability to convey in a language we would understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, physics can do an awful lot, but I think the universe is far more complex than even the greatest minds can conceive. And so why that's a philosophy question. I don't think obviously it appears, I don't put that as a God, at least not as a way, the Christian God, the way they describe it makes no sense. It wouldn't be something like that. But if there is some kind of intelligence, what the hell is it? Who the hell knows? I think, again, people, they poop on intelligence theory too quickly, only because you have the advocates for like intelligence, design, which are just idiots running dumb arguments. They don't do it from any kind of like philosophical basis. They do it from bad understanding of science, and that's why most of them are crapped on. And I'm not an intelligent design advocate by any means, but I like the philosophy behind even simulation theory with Nick Bostrom. People didn't just shit on him because he's not he's not an intelligent design advocate, but he made some very good philosophical points in his argumentations. Doesn't mean I accept simulation theory, but it doesn't mean that I could crap on it saying, oh, well, yeah, it's crap. No, it's interesting. But that's what a good argument is. It's something that you ponder. You don't by fiat just throw it out the window. That's what to me is a good argument.
And I think a part of science is about questions and doesn't necessarily get all bent out of shape because it doesn't have all the answers.
Right.
Dogma and religion often push the answers and try to force the question.
Well, because they start with their preset.
That's right.
Yeah, they start with the conclusion or their premise, and then everything has to follow from that, and that doesn't really ever work out well.
Yeah, well, and it's better for people to understand it. It's better to be uncomfortable. Look,
yes,
we are flawed. We can't understand everything, but we put out arguments. We put out hypotheses and theories to try to engage with these things in a way that we're not saying that we know everything. We're not saying we're 100% true, with regard to everything that we're saying, but we want other people to disagree. And if they do, to explain that, because we want to get closer to understanding what the universe is, why we're here, what the purpose is, if anything, for us to live and all that. And maybe it's just to have a fucking good time, and people need to relax.
Yeah. Well, and if there is a big answer, we're not going to know it we're not going to know it here. So why bother? That's why I'm embracing absurdism more than usual.
But that doesn't mean we don't stop trying to understand things.
Absolutely. Look, absurd. When people become an absurdist, which I'm not actually blown absurdist yet, but it appeals to me. It doesn't mean you just stop trying. Matter of fact, one of the greatest principles for absurdism is recognizing that even if there isn't a true meaning for things, and we're all going to die anyways, the fact that you don't cave into suicide is a heroic accomplishment. For an absurdist would be somebody who's anti-suicide, even though you're all going to die. It is because you have value to living your life the best you can because it's limited.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, like, there's all kinds of strange dualities in life. There's paradoxes in life. Sometimes things don't make sense. And, like, we can talk about these things, but, like light and dark, male and female, all of these dualities and paradoxes, it can be quite complex, but we're trying to figure all this out, look at it in a very linear way. We're using reason and logic, right? So that's our tool, if you will, to try to look at and understand the universe. So we're trying to use logic. We're looking at fallacies. We're using reason and all these different things. And so this is our fundamental tool to try to understand the universe a little bit better. There might be other ways to look at the universe as well, and we can compare and contrast those. But the point being that at the end of the day, we're talking about these things because we care deeply about truth. We care about what the universe is and why we were here. What what the thing is, because it's so crazy. You're just alive, right? You're just born and you're alive, and it's like, what the fuck am I doing here? Like, what is this all about? Like, am I supposed to make money for this corporation here, or like, what is?
Wait to hit 50. Reason? You start thinking about those things even more.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
absolutely, probably, yeah.
But I also say that when you hit 50, you gain the privilege of rounding your age up to 100. That's a privilege.
Yeah.
As somebody who just had their version 6.2 firmware upgrade, I can tell you that's a good privilege to be able to round up to 100.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I need a firmware upgrade. We all need a good firmware upgrade.
But
yeah.
It is, the thing with understanding, of studying and observing the universe. What I hope people are able to do is they understand some of the fundamentals to the point where when you discover something you don't understand and get excited, that to me is the level you want to be. So that when you hear something puzzling happens, and why is it puzzling that this super powerful gamma ray burst was discovered? And what goes on there, and we don't know. We get excited because it's something we don't know. And one of the important things towards gaining an understanding is to first admit you don't know.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people are just hesitant to do that. But it's like earlier though.
It's good to say you don't know.
Well, look when Darkweb came in, right? And we're talking about economics, man. I was I was fine to letting people know, look, I know nothing about that topic. I hate that topic. I suck at that topic. There are people out there that think they want to pontificate on every single topic out there, and yet they have absolutely no idea the basics. I don't like talking about topics I don't know at least the basics about. I just don't do it. I avoid it. Yeah.
That's reasonable.
And
you should feel that way.
Have you guys ever in 10 years seen me go into a social political conversation like with Vosh or Destiny or any of those guys, what they talk about? Have any of you ever seen me in those conversations? No.
Well, you could. Like, I think you could do it, but you'd have to do
well, sure. Yeah, of course, if I studied up on it, but I'm not interested in it.
Yeah.
I would recommend, even if you did the research, don't do it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree with you. I'm agree with you.
I found it curious. You were saying that when economics got hard, when you started getting difference equations, so forth. And yes, some of those things with you get rates of change and systems describing rates of change in terms of equations and derivatives. Yes, you need to do that. Yeah. But I would have thought, even though it's not required in nuclear school, having some differential equations would make some of the things, like the whole issue with xenon in a reactor, fairly understandable, right? It's fairly
I understand the equations for that. Yeah. But I mean, it just when it came to supply and demand, it was.
Oh, okay.
And first of all, it was just. I took it about the same time. I actually took it while I was in.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I took it from Texas A&M Extension course while I was in the military. We get those programs you get where you can take.
Sure.
So I took it. I was in the Navy after nuke school. So it's not like I didn't understand the math per se, right? But I didn't understand the math. I don't know. It's hard to explain. It was just hard. It was very, very hard.
Yeah, because again, Steve, you're no dummy. I know some people might find that surprising.
Well, hold up now.
Yeah.
No.
Hey, when I admit something's hard, I'm not bullshitting. I mean, it's just like I said, I know what I'm capable of understanding. I know what I'm not capable of understanding, and I thought economics was very, very difficult for me.
And you're intellectually honest enough to admit when you don't know, and that gives you a lot of power.
So that being said, a lot of people who say they're economists or economically minded don't actually understand the subject material
Probably
either.
not. I do want. I do want to ask thing, and Dark. I want to ask thing, and Dark. You have my word. No matter how you answer, I'm gonna continue on. Like if anything else, I'm not gonna kick you or anything like that. You have my word, okay? But are your initials actually CH?
You mean my name?
Yeah. Do you go by another handle CH?
Yeah.
Okay. That's. I thought so. I'm gonna continue, and I figured that from the beginning, but I wasn't sure. I'm gonna try to make amends with you a little bit, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. I don't. I mean, look, I know who Dark is. Okay. I'm not gonna say who his actual handle. We go back how many years? A long time.
Decade.
Yeah, and I thought your voice sounded familiar. But I'm kind of curious because obviously you were interested in this particular argument enough to even read the paper, talk to the people, and come back. Even though I've told you a million times I want nothing to do with you, but the fact that you've kept it about the argument, I do appreciate that. I mean, it does mean something to me. But you're honest about answering your question, so if we can put things in the past, I'm happy with that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Fine with that.
Okay.
Yay!
I try to be a peacemaker. There's been a lot of water in the bridge with people that were very, very dishonest people say. And by the way, Dark will remember there was actually a time, I don't know if maybe you won't remember, it was many, many years ago, but somebody who they do it all the time now frequently, but this is one of the first times somebody did it. They actually had a conversation faked between him and I.
Wow.
They actually faked a conversation between him and I. And I was like, this, it wasn't me. It was literally a fake conversation. And that tells you the depth of what some people were willing to go to try to defame me. Do you remember that conversation? Do you remember that?
Oh, well, no, I don't remember seeing it.
Yeah.
I remember.
You remember hearing about it?
Oh, yeah, I might have heard about it. It's been long enough now that I'm not sure.
Yeah, it was. I might have the screenshot somewhere, but there was a conversation that you were supposedly talking to me, but you weren't. And they
was it like text or something?
Yeah, there was a
Oh, that's easy to fake.
Yeah, and it came out that it wasn't me. So this was water under the bridge. Eventually, people knew, and I don't remember who they determined eventually did it. I don't remember their name, but people have been trolling for a very, very long time, and you hung out with a lot of those trolls, and you are known as a troll. No offense, but like I said, I'm more interested in the dialogue than any kind of personal crap. And the discussion, and I'll tell you, he had good points. I'm not going to detract that from him. He had good points, and so, if I could put things in the past and just forget about, a lot of the stuff, I'm cool with that. But I respect the fact you're at least honest about it. So thank you, Dark. But I'm not going to put out your actual initials, brother. I mean, your actual name. If that's cool.
Oh, I mean, I don't care. I'm fine if you do.
Yeah. No, I know. Well, I mean. You've had a couple other pseudonyms as well in my live chat. So, anyways, I don't want to dwell on the past. Those are, there's good times and bad times about the GDC. Logic only zone knows. I had some good times. Just a lot of dishonest players out there for some reason.
Yeah, sad.
Gotta let go of that ego, man.
Yeah,
gotta let go.
By the way, Steve, can I clarify something? I mentioned about myself in iOS. I'm not an iOS developer, but there are things in iOS that use things I developed relating to hash function, relating to random generation, some time stuff.
Cool.
And I also am a major tester, so I have a box. I got a stack of iPhones. That's probably knee high of stuff where Apple has me test their stuff. And sometimes I get new things, and I work.
Yeah, but they still use some of your code, though. Your hash functions.
Well, I mean, some of the algorithms are in there, yes, and there's code in there. But to say there's a very specific thing of being Apple developer. I've never been an Apple employee. I never.
No. It's all open source.
To be sure. Yeah. To clarify.
It's all GNU.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're doing like consultant work or something.
Yeah, and open source stuff.
But because it's GNU open source. But your name still is on the EULA agreement for iPhones.
And stuff there's stuff in Linux that's there and BSD that's there as well. I've had my hand in it, but again, it's all part of contributing to allowing other people to do amazing things with technology. That's the whole point of open source.
Yeah. I mean, we probably wouldn't be talking on the internet if it wasn't for Landon's functions and stuff like that. Some of the stuff he did.
Salute.
And plenty of other people too. Right?
Well, yeah, no, sure. I mean, it's not one person, but I mean, when you know how you like Al Gore, Al Gore going, "Oh, I helped develop the internet." I'm like, no, I actually know somebody who helped develop the internet. Legit, like, you know.
Although technically, what he said was, "I was senator when
he gave the money for it. Yeah.
They funded the DARPANETs."
Right. He gave the money for it, and I get that, right? But I don't know if he meant.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
But do you think he meant it to be more? I don't know if that was intentional or not.
His phrase was, "I was there when they funded the internet."
I thought is that exactly what he said? Because that's true. I mean, that part is true.
Yeah,
Interesting.
And he's refined also. He's clarified also the other way. He said, "I was there when they started the internet."
But Landon's like, but I helped write the code for it, asshole.
But that's okay. I mean, people that funded it, the people that started it, and again, there are plenty of other people that had much more massive hand in developing the internet than myself. And you don't try to sit there and say, "Well, I did this, you did this." It's everyone contributed to this thing because it was fun. We enjoyed it.
Yeah, and it took everybody together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it took everybody.
He needs a T-shirt that says "Blame me for 4chan."
Oh, jeez.
No. Well, there's a bunch of stuff with DNS and how we did routing on the internet that I'm involved with as well. Something called path alias and stuff like that. There's a whole. And
how about you just have a shirt that's "Blame me for all your social media bullshit"?
Yeah.
I have nothing, and you know, it's some of the social media stuff I don't really like. I don't, and it was, the internet was fun when there were fewer people on it.
Yeah.
Yes, I can agree with that.
Yeah, I miss bulletin boards.
Yeah.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Yeah.
Dial-up. I remember
great.
doing what is it? Legend of the Red Dragon.
Yeah.
And playing games on sysop bulletin boards using like cheesy software on a 2400 baud modem. I love that shit, dude. I actually thrived, calling up bulletin boards and oh man, that was fun. Just fun.
And so I think the problem as the internet became more and more accessible to people is we got a wider and wider variety of people, and instead of niche bell curve of the early adopters, you got a higher level of stuff. And I can remember when somebody having antisocial troll behavior was ostracized and cut off, right?
Yeah.
Stop
immediately. Like if you're on a forum and you're, spamming or harassing people, it's like, no, get out of here. We just want to hang out and have a good time. Get the fuck out of our community.
Yeah.
That was normal and acceptable.
But we were also trying to make the internet more accessible to people, and we got what we deserve, which is people. But
I think a lot of people that were around back in those days, they appreciate the things more, because the struggle was real back then, man. when you're downloading an 8K file and your mom picks up the phone, Mom,
those were the days. Downloading an anime music video.
You're not even that old.
For 10 hours. Yeah.
He's not even that old.
So what do you think?
You were like 2 in the 90s.
No. 1987 is when I was born.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think is going to happen to Twitter?
Oh, that's a good. I was going to have a whole topic on that. That's good foreshadowing. So here's the thing. I did a poll about how it's going to affect their lives that Elon Musk took over, and I don't know, it was like a couple hundred respondents. There was a lot of respondents, and most of them are just like, yeah, no big deal. It's not going to affect them, and I'm the same way. I don't care. It really makes no difference to me. It makes no difference to me.
Happens.
And if they want to, Checkmarks wants to play $20 a month. Who gives a shit? I don't care.
I'm talking about what do you think was going to happen to Twitter in terms of because one of the things I'm concerned is that the people who know how to keep the lights on and run the show, fired. There's a lot of those folks who have left, or have been fired, and that's not a good sign for the stability of the platform.
Yeah, I'm sure he's going to find people. I'm sure there's other people that can step in. Nobody's so invaluable they can't be replaced on these systems.
But the other possibility is that Twitter will become the Ask Jeeves and the AOL of social media, and they'll move on to something else.
People are like, and when somebody says what's Ask Jeeves, then you actually understood what he was saying.
Guys, that's the
Right?
only search
Right?
engine I actually trust. That's
You're
by
right.
the way.
Sure you
So,
yeah. Prodigy.
yeah.
Prodigy. Remember Prodigy?
Yeah. So and that's where I think one of the things I think that if you hear the desire sometimes of the guy who owns it, he idolizes things like WeChat in China, wanting to be the everything sort of stuff, and the internet doesn't take kindly to something that builds its own walled garden. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Facebook will fail. Now they call themselves Meta or whatever the thing, and then that's usual sign when they start renaming themselves. That's the
I'm already
the
figuring
second
Facebook-
derivative negative.
It's
Facebook may not be
inevitable
around
that
in
they're
5
gonna fail,
years.
so
Yeah.
they're just trying to like become something else.
Yeah.
It's like the thing we are doesn't work. Try to become something else.
And
right?
when something tries to create a monopoly or tries to create that walled garden, the internet views that as censorship and routes around it. And that's where I think one of the problems is that Twitter tries to turn into the we want to be everything. We want to be your bank. We want to be your chat system, your phone system, so forth. That's where I think it's
and I hate that kind. I don't like the all-in-ones. I like something to be really good at what it does exclusively. I don't need an all-in-one unless it's something
But the problem is I don't know how does Twitter make money?
So it hasn't been making.
It has sponsors.
Right?
I mean, you do have promotional things
So
that people pay for, but
they're trying to make money on it now with these $8 subscriptions.
Yeah, and look, I got nothing against a subscription model, but that's for the check marks, right? And I mean,
right.
But again, I don't. At this point, I don't even use Twitter that much, anyways. I privated my account 2 months ago.
I don't even have a Twitter.
Yeah, I don't care. So, Twitter's just for me to dick around with. It's always has been a sandbox. I ask people questions on it to kind of get feedback. But other than that, if I lost my Twitter account, I don't think it would phase me at all. I have my in real life stuff going on. I stream when I can. I hang out with when I want to hang out with. I do my Friday non sequitur shows. But other than that, Twitter has been such a cesspool that it's just, other than just conversing with people in DM, that's mainly what I use it for. I literally just DM people with it. Other than that,
you and I chat on DMs privately on there.
Yeah, I use that's my main. But that's my main communication program.
Facebook too is chatting with.
Yeah,
people,
I don't like chatting on Facebook though. I like
using the Messenger.
Yeah, I don't like that. I mean, I prefer Twitter Messenger.
Yeah, well, actually, I could agree with you.
Yeah.
I could agree. It's just that's the only means I have to connect with specific people.
Sure. My family's not on Twitter. Like my family is all on Facebook, right? It's just not my preferred means, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah,
which is fine. No, I don't need one that has both. It's just whatever. But do I think Elon taking over is going to be a big deal? Maybe to some people, but as far as like the free speech issue, I think they need to redo their entire understanding of what is allowed and not allowed, because it's backfired on them immensely. They've actually been blocking people that have just been the good people and people that are speaking out against bad things. And that's kind of what happened with Facebook when they put people in jail for just repeating what somebody else has said. Like, hey, this person threatened my life. Oh, we have to block you this because this goes against the terms of service. And they did nothing about the person who made the threat.
Yeah.
That's just wrong on multiple levels. And people got sick of that.
Right.
Well, that's one of the problems with social media in general is once you get a large enough pool of people, you have those extremes out on the edge of the bell curve that are going to just try to abuse the system or be antisocial or worse.
Yeah.
And if you don't have some way to handle the extreme people or the people that are being obnoxious, people that are being antisocial, you're going to descend into chaos. Even if you think you try to do this absolute free speech of anyone can say anything, you suddenly find, particularly working in the international community, that you can't do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, here's my thing. I'm not a free speech absolutist per se, but my thing is there needs to be more controls to be. Finally, they added, like for example, on Twitter, they added the ability to leave a conversation. That should have been ages ago. Yeah. I people have the right to say whatever they want about me and other people on Twitter. I don't care, but I also have a right not to view it. And so I, not just muted people, but I blocked people. And And if my name is tagged with any of them, I can now leave that conversation. But I shouldn't be able to have even my name tagged in certain people's conversations if that's not some option that I want to have, available to me. I want to have an availability to have options of where I get tagged in certain things. And if a person blocked who tags me, that makes no sense. Because I don't want to be notified of that.
I'd love to be able to say something like,
it doesn't anymore, I don't think, but it used to.
Sure. If I am tagged in something with more than 5 @ signs, I don't want to know, right? Because I don't know these things where all of a sudden I find there's this message and there are 30 people listed on it, and I have no idea what it's about, nor do I.
Yes, well, Facebook's worse. I get people tag 60 people on Facebook, 60, 70, 80, 100 people. I have no interest in those posts.
In email, if you see a message that's sent to 60 people, it's going to be spam or a bad mailing list, right? And so when I asked about what happened to Twitter, one of the concerns is if Twitter gets turned into we want to be your PayPal, we want to be your address book people,
hate that. I don't want
calendar, and your messaging system and so forth. And if they also go after things, because there's a number of mechanized things on Twitter that's quite nice. Like there's this bot that shows you random pictures of the Mandelbrot set, and there's this bot that shows you what the Hubble's looking at. You can see saying Hubble's looking at this star on behalf of this person, and here's a paper. There's these mechanized bots out there, and if they want to say they want to get rid of the bots, required to be human, those things become a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I use the Iridium satellite system connection to Twitter when I'm in Antarctica to post messages about where I am, small text messages. If all of a sudden I have to do a CAPTCHA, I'm going to be cut off from there when I'm out in remote places. So I'm concerned that the functionality of Twitter may change to where it becomes less useful, and the lack of people who understand what's going on will cause problems. That's my concern about it. Independent of what you think of Elon Musk, which
I don't care
much of.
Yeah. Well, I think what people are most concerned about is their capacity to participate in culture war, saying that people should be like this or like that, and it's like, come on, people, we're all human. Let's all find a way to get along. No, it's not.
But it's all counterculture. It's all. But on Twitter, a lot of it is shutting down the communications, shutting down the opposition.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, if we're not looking for a middle ground, if we're not looking a way to collaborate and work together, then we're just trying to destroy each other. Like, that is the case.
Yeah,
it's
but
not
where does free speech end if it's harmful?
Yeah.
Like when Trump got banned off Twitter, there's pros and cons for that. Do I think he said anything offensive to the point where it deserved a ban? No, but I'm not a Trump supporter. But it is a private. It was a private organization. They could do whatever they want on it. I mean, it's just they could ban whoever they want. But I mean, was it beneficial to ban Trump? I don't know. Man, it could have the opposite effect. If you ban people like Trump and you start banning people merely because they put up forth a message you don't like, that becomes very problematic. But of course you have to look at the damage that could be done. So by people that have massive influence. Like Alex Jones had massive influence, but he's supposedly paying the price because he's been sued to oblivion. But after the damage has already been done, so where do you draw the line on free speech on these types of platforms to cause such kind of harm to people by people saying things on there that can cause massive harm? Should we allow it? I tend to say yes.
But Steve, you've run up against really sick, demented people on social media.
Yeah, and I don't want to see it, and I haven't been. I've literally been not paying attention to any of it for several months.
And that sort of thing is that okay, you have the mechanisms to avoid those people. The problem occurs with some people who are not in that situation. Right? If you're a company trying to reach people and you don't want to basically exclude stuff, and you have customers that they're behaving that way.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're a politician that's trying to, reach and serve your constituency, and you got people attacking you, that's a real problem.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
I agree.
So in that regard, I would say that I don't believe human beings have the right to rhetoric. I think if you're going to make a argument or you're trying to make people agree with you, or to understand your perspective, I believe you have the right for that. But I don't believe emotions should play any part in it. And standardizing and allowing emotion to play a role in what our culture becomes, I think is despicable and disgusting. And politicians rely on this constantly. And I think that this is bad. I think that we have to use logic, argumentation, evidence, and these kinds of a thing, which is why our culture is having such a hard time at.
No, I disagree. I think that we have to temper it emotions. That's human nature. As human beings with societal.
That's what I'm saying.
We have to temper it. No. We have to temper it with emotions. We have to include our emotions in our in our discussions in certain formulations of our decisions, because we have to recognize that humans are not just machines. We're not just robots. There is an emotional factor. So when they make a law that says, okay, how this is going to affect people, there might be an emotional component to that of how it might be perceived by the people. Even though logically it might make sense, there is an emotional factor.
The emotion supersedes the logic.
I don't think it should be superseding. I think it should be in conjunction with it.
But it does. But it has that.
Well, in San Francisco, yes, and it has been. When emotion supersedes the reasons, yeah, there's a problem. It should be guided and kind of, like I said, tempered by emotions. But when you have a law based solely on emotion, that's never worked out well.
Yeah. Well, but for example, if you listen to any politician speak, it's like very emotional. It's very rhetorical. These are things that we need to deal with because that's not reasoning. It's not.
Well, politics is all about, placating to their constituents and trying to get the vote. Their whole argument is to get people to vote for them. Well,
I'm just saying it's a problem that has to be solved. And I think reasoning is the solution, helping people to understand the merit of reasoning and to apply it.
Well, why don't they start there early then?
That's the solution to the problem.
I really think they should teach basic philosophy, logic, and critical thinking skills in elementary school.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
I'm not saying don't feel, but that, like, when we're making a decision that affects all of our survival, that has to be based upon evidence. It has to be.
Yeah, well, I think, again, it has to be data, but there's also pragmatic factors to be involved. You could be a benevolent, you can be malevolent, or you can be pragmatic. And sometimes the pragmatic approach just has to be the case. And so there's no good or bad out of it. It's just, it's going to affect certain people. And you have to understand that some people are going to suffer because of it, but it's a pragmatic decision. It's neutral.
Yeah, well, no, I definitely understand that. And I'm talking about us moving from this emotional rhetorical kind of foundation to more of like a reason and a logic, like, hey, let's really look at this evidence. Let's really look at this argumentation we're putting forth, which is why we're going to do this policy or, do this type of a thing. And I think if we can really do that, then we can make the world a much better place.
And I think a lot, that's why I want separation of church and state, though. When policy is being led by people saying this is what God wants, I'm not interested in that conversation.
Yeah.
I don't want people to vote that way.
Our civilization is going through another one of these cycles where, for example, cults of personality and dogmatic, groups are, becoming belligerent. That sort of phase we're in right now, and we've been in that sort of phase before. And those sort of movements end up collapsing at some stage, often due to external forces or events. And right now we're in one of those cycles where the stuff is building up. But if you go back to some place in history, like the rise of people such as Mussolini and Franco and those sort of folks, that those personalities, big personalities moving forward, they ended up collapsing due to external forces, and that was the case was world wars. But eventually, that society grows out of that phase into something different, and we just have to, I think, sadly, go through it again, and be able to have discourse. Right? It was. You could look up in the past and find where discourse was very difficult to have because societies were very belligerent, very attacking the people who don't agree with them, type of stuff.
Violently so, and that's been the case more and more recently. That people will use violence rather than argumentation. And people have been doing some
which is not acceptable.
No, of course not. And there's some crappy
absolutely not.
Look, I am all for, and there's a really unjust law. Sure, there are times, very few times, but there are times when laws have been offensive and unjust, and there's time to be, aggressive. I don't want to use violent. There's never harm anybody else. But I mean aggressive as in, protest, and stand up and violate that law. I firmly believe that. But those are far and few between. And you really need to have a really good moral center for those things, because if they pass a law, for example, like that made like some kind of indentured slavery back or something like that, those are the things where people stand up and go, no, hell no, not going to happen. Not in our territories, because, we don't think it's going to happen, but it could actually happen incrementally. Our laws have been eroding our First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment rights for how long now? I mean, I watch all those freaking auditor shows. I get what they're trying to do, but they do have a point. People do not know their rights or their liberties. Most of them have no idea. They're never taught that. They never read the Constitution. They're not. They say they take civil, civil courses, and used to be mandatory. Civics, yeah. But most people, even when they take civics, they're just not understanding what their rights and liberties are. Matter of fact, one of the things I want to do is I want to ask people when we go on the streets here. I want to ask people, do you know what the Constitution is? But do you know what your rights are? And I bet most of them have no idea what their rights are.
I think so. I think still our civilization will go through a phase where this adherence to cult and adherence to tribal group stuff is going to come to a head and will crash. Unfortunately, the crash is probably going to come from some bad event, and we'll get through.
That'd be the age of enlightenment. Yeah. Well, look at the pushback. I mean, even from my paper. I mean, even Darkweb. I mean, the group that he came from, they want to see this paper bad. They want to cancel. I think they canceled me 5 years ago, but I'm still around because I don't care. They don't know me like they think they know me at all. Like exactly, I'm the opposite of what they think of me. But that's because I can still get on. I still have a voice. I still can talk about the topics, and that's all that matters to me. The rest is irrelevant. It really is. I mean, like I said, I have my own life, but they know nothing about. They get everything wrong about my personal life. They've gotten everything wrong from ages. I mean, seriously, they know nothing about my personal life. It's so funny when I see people just come up with this pull shit right out of their ass, dude. It's bizarre because I mean, I live with somebody who knows the truth, and they're like, "Where the fuck did they get this idea from?" I'm like, "Fuck if I know." Literally, like what I'm saying, I have no idea where they pulled that out of their ass from. But holy shit,
but Steve, if you don't care about the facts, then you can do anything you want on social media.
That's right. You can say anything. You can believe anything. You can project anything.
Social media is powerful. But that's why that's what still goes on the argumentation. If you notice, even with Dark, he still had to provide argumentation to my paper. Right?
Yeah. If people just don't like you, they just go along with it.
Yeah.
I think it probably helps that whenever anyone brought up Steve's personal life, I just tuned out. Because I don't care where Steve lives. I don't care who Steve talks to. I don't care what Steve eats. I don't give a shit. He's on the other side of the country for me. And has nothing to do with me.
And I believe you. If I didn't believe you, you would no longer still be in here, right? I actually do believe you on this, dude. I think that speaks volumes because I don't want to make it about personal shit. I never did. But other people wanted about personal stuff, and that's why I left that community. I was like, I'm not interested in these personal little beefs you have with people. And what's worse is when you're actively going after people, and you're talking to their employer, you're talking to their landlords, you're talking to their friends, their family, their wives, their sisters, their kids. That's fucked up shit to me. But that's what people were doing, and they're still doing it.
Was it the most ridiculous one? I think someone said something about you eating a lobster roll.
I like my lobster rolls. They're good.
Yeah, it was from like a dollar store. Yeah. They're like, oh, he loves lobster rolls from the dollar store.
Oh, you sicko.
I know, a bad person. Yeah.
I'm like, well, I've had a candy bar from a dollar store, and I thought it tasted great. What the fuck's the problem?
But I also, but here's what they don't know, dude. Just the other day, I had a friend whose mother passed away. I took him out for sushi to cheer him up. A nice meal, right? So, I mean, I might have a lobster roll from a dollar store that I like, but also like, decent food that I treated my friend to because his mom passed away. Do they give me credit for any of that shit? No. Why would they? One, they wouldn't know about it, but two, it's they don't even know about my personal fucking life. They have no idea. It's the strangest thing they make hay about. It's like, okay, whatever.
But that's the same thing. When you hear of somebody that has some following, right? let's say a politician or a celebrity, you don't know who that person is. You don't know.
No, but I go by their politics, what they say, right?
Well, even that can be that can be, I wouldn't say a front, but you don't know who they are. You don't know them personally.
Speaking as a politician, right?
Yeah.
But Landon is a politician, by the way. Well, he was.
I'm retired, but that's a just because you know of somebody, like you know an author, you know a musician, right? You know them as that big entity. You don't know the small person. You don't know the individual. And to assume, oh, this singer is blah blah blah, therefore I love their music, therefore they're my friend, blah blah blah, and they don't know you, and you don't know who they are. You just know the front, the entity, the product, right? And same thing, Steve. You're one who's known on the internet, but people know you as your internet personality, not you personally.
Yeah, well, except for like my roommate who knows me 15 years. But here's the thing: like you still know, general personality types. Like if somebody said, "Hey, Landon's personality type, when he gets done, he goes outside, he starts going around and just starts randomly punching people. Just knocks. I don't know what it is about Landon, but he goes around and starts randomly punching people, right? I'd be like, no, I don't think that's the case, right? It's like, no, that's antithetical to what I know about Landon, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to me, they just make shit up, and they don't understand everything they talk about is antithetical. Like this, like the rumor that I met somebody at Applebee's and ambushed them, and I was like, that's just antithetical to my nature. Literally, the video I have is one of a couple that I have of this person who asked for them, and she called me and wanted to go on a second date. I mean, literally, she called me up on for a second date, and we happened to go out to Applebee's. But that's not the story that's makes them happy. They're like, oh no, Steve was some guy that just met some girl at Applebee's and started filming them. Who the fuck does this? And that's antithetical to my nature.
This, the celebrity gossip stuff, right? That again, I treat, internet drama like celebrity gossip stuff. It's not good entertainment, and it often harms people. So I try to avoid that sort of stuff.
But right? Can you imagine me people created that shit out of nowhere? Like my roommate would be like, where the fuck did they get that idea from that you met somebody at Applebee's? I'm like, I have no idea, dude.
But I can tell you to the people that I know privately that come and say, you'd be amazed at what they say that I do publicly, right?
Yeah.
And these folks and people just make stuff up. And that's one of the things that I think sometimes that some of these, again, like the gossip column people and the celebrity, inside stuff, and the supermarket tabloids, they just make stuff up.
Yeah. And
oftentimes they can get away with it if it's either so absurd no one believe it, or it's just crazy type of stuff. But they also often do real harm for somebody who's just trying to live their life. Maybe they were a movie star, they've retired, and people, they just want to be left alone.
Yeah, exactly. They want the drama, though. They feed on it. That's their whole business model.
But people who have retired, or they're no longer, they're over with a movie, and
let them be on their own. They don't, they let them do their own life kind of stuff.
But I can say that if you encounter somebody famous that you recognize, probably the best thing you can do for them is to not make a deal. Just treat them like a normal person.
I've always done that. I mean, I've met very famous people. I mean,
yes.
Barry Manilow used to be a customer of mine.
Yeah.
I didn't get all starstruck.
And just treat them as a normal
Steve
person.
Garvey would be a customer of ours.
And don't bring up their what they're famous for.
Yeah.
Just treat them as anyone else, and you will do them a great favor.
But dude, I mean, I know this sounds braggadocious, and I don't mean to be, but almost everybody on Non Sequitur has a wiki page. I mean, I deal with people that are name recognition in their fields all the time. I don't get starstruck with any of those. I get more starstruck with people that I really like their stuff, like Noel Plum, who I had to cancel. We're gonna reschedule. I like Noel Plum's commentary. I get starstruck with him, even though he's not a big YouTuber, but his commentary is so good. Over the last few years, especially, I'm like, oh my God, because I've never had a conversation with him, and I'm looking forward to that. Right? I don't think he's ever been on my channel where we actually talked one. That's what that to me is more starstruck, because it's like here's a person I really like his commentary. As far as like famous people or whatever, I deal with them all the freaking time.
Yeah.
I do got to wrap this up. I'll give you one more example of something that I found very interesting lately, because this was somehow going around, the rumor mill, and I was like, man, you guys don't understand physics. So, as you know, I did graduate nuclear power school. This is not made up bullshit. Not the highest GPA, but not the lowest either. I was kind of in the middle. But
and by the way, thank you for your service.
Yeah,
we really do owe you a debt of gratitude.
You're welcome.
And I don't say that cliche wise.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. I do really appreciate it. And I respect all the people that did serve. I just hope the people that got out talk about their service honorably and don't dishonor themselves and don't lie about it. Everything I've told about the military has been true stories. But this is one thing that they thought this was some like major revelation that I lied or something. And I'm like, oh my God, these people are fucking stupid. So, I people know I was on the USS Truxtun, which is CGN-35. It was a converted DLGN, basically a guided missile cruiser. It's nuclear powered at 2 reactors, 2 D2G reactors, 149, 150 megawatts each, M1, M2 division. Now, when you get on board your ship, you're nobody, just like on a submarine. You're just you're a nub, right? It takes two years to really get fully qualified, where you're somebody of respectability, where you know what you're doing. I guess you're saying, right? So there's 2 years training, 2 years on board. So it's about 4 years into your enlistment till you feel like you have accomplished something, right? Because you know everything about the ship. You got your ESWAS, your interim supervisor. You're supervising people. You're training.
You should be able to train people.
Yeah. Matter of fact, they literally have a book called Qualification Book, and they'll have a signature block, and I'll say, okay, describe this system, draw this system, explain the principle of, whatever, right? And you have to sign your name to it, showing that this person came to you and you gave them thorough questioning on it, that they understand what they're doing. You're literally signing your name. Show them how to operate a feed pump. Show them how to shut down a ship service turbo generator. Understand what a regulator is. Understand, how to do how to do a salinity test, using sodium nitrate, because we had to do a potable water supply, which again, this is what it gets into. So, because we had to learn secondary reactor chemistry. Why? Because corrosion in a reactor is bad. Right? You get crud traps, cobalt 60. You have to put potassium and sodium.
You can have seals that become compromised, all kinds of stuff.
So you have to maintain a specific water chemistry on it, right? You don't want it too base. You want a little more base than acidic, but you don't want to you don't want like a pH of like 12 in your reactor water. That's going to be really bad. Long story short, in the N1 engine room, we had a salinity plant, which is a distiller unit. What this did was it took brine, which is seawater, it heated it up, it filtered out all the bad stuff, it took the condensate, it cooled the condensate, and it made drinkable water, which was stored in the ship's potable water containers. Then we would put sodium hydroxide into that, and then, which is basically bleach, and that'd kill any organisms that's left over, right? Because the distillation process isn't 100%. You do have some carryover. And so you have to kill all the bacteria in there. If not, you get really, really sick. It's happened. It sucks. The one time I got sick was from potable water, and I had to go to medical and had an IV. I was so dehydrated. I was literally going to die. I was white as a sheet. Messing with potable water when you're in the middle of the ocean is bad, right? But this was
bad.
So this was an accident that happened in the potable water. Not my fault or anything.
By the way, that's the same problem happens in Antarctica, where you got to be very careful about your water source.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you get contaminated water source, you get the bad diarrhea and dehydration. You're in a load.
Oh my God, I couldn't stop for days, dude. Both ends. Couldn't keep anything down. I literally turned. I'm not bullshitting you. I was white. I knocked on medical, and they're like, "Get in here. Just get in here now." They put an IV. I got an IV solution that made me feel 1,000 times better. Just the IV alone, because I got rehydrated. But anyways, the story's going somewhere. So,
yeah.
The number one distillery, or another one distillation plant. Could we had a distillery? That'd be cool. Bilge rum.
Well, you did. Someone must have had a still somewhere.
No, they really didn't. Not on my ship, at least. I've heard rumors of other called bilge water alcohol or something. Bilge making. But anyways, the distillery plant, in order to heat the water, uses steam.
Mm-hmm.
Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water. Where does the steam come from? It comes from the water
From your heat exchange.
From the reactor plant.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
we had a reboiler too, but that was
Yeah.
for the ancillary secondary heating type stuff. But this came off the primary system for the reactor plant, and now anyway,
You didn't have a secondary steam system. You did primary.
we had a secondary steam system for auxiliary called a reboiler, but even that, everything still comes from the reactor eventually.
Sure. Yes.
That's your primary heat source.
Yes.
So even if it came from a reboiler, which was still my watch called a messenger watch, you had a couple major watch stations. You had the engine room supervisor, which it took 4 years to finally qualify. So I was engine room supervisor. You had ship service trim and generator watch, which was probably the second highest you can get because you're in charge of generators. Okay. Then there was the messenger watch, which went around to taking all the logs on the shafts, and then the reboiler and all those temperatures. And then you had the feed pump watch, which was the water going into the reactor. So so you had to make sure that the water going in, the water coming out was all good because if you're a higher steam demand, you need more water going in. Obviously, you need more.
And you want that water to be clean and pure. You do not want to have, the worst thing you could have is get salt water.
Yeah, this is not salt water in there. Clearly not. But I mean, it's not the same system as the potable water supply because there's a different chemical in there, right? You don't put sodium hydroxide in the primary side. You put it in the secondary side. You have potassium. It was sodium hypochlorite and one. It was potassium. Was it potassium? Oh, I can't remember the name of it.
But because if an oil reactor, if you get so desperate, you have to basically flush it with seawater because you screwed up your
system. we call that the fuck valve.
Yeah.
Seriously,
that reactor is toast.
There was 4 valves. There was suck, fuck, spill, and fill. Right? I obviously can't make this up, right? I have no creativity. So suck, fuck, spill, and fill. And these 4 valves that we had, so spill was basically it got the water level in the ship service turbo generator got too high in the hot well, you spill it over. So that goes overboard. You want to fill the hot well. You put more water in that secondary system. Okay, no big deal. Then you had suck if you want to take a sample. You had that was it acted like a little vacuum. You'd go to the vacuum pressure and you from what was that? It was just above vacuum pressure. But anyways, it would allow you to take a sample of some kind. And then you had fill. And what fill did, it was padlocked. It wasn't
fill. You mean
fuck. Yeah, the fuck. It wasn't padlocked. It had a chain on it. It wasn't padlocked. That's right. It had a chain on it. But you had to remove the chain. And then when you open that valve, it allows seawater to go directly into the reactor core vessel.
Yeah.
They call it fuck because once you did that, you would never recover from that, obviously.
Yeah, and at that point, you've got contaminants in your reactor vessel.
Yeah.
That you've got to remove, and the way to remove that is basically you're pulling down the core, you're pulling out the rods, you're trying to determine whether the rods are actually usable again, and you're scouring the inside.
Yeah, you're never going to recover that. But anyways, so long story short, the reason I had a guy come on my channel, and it was a shipmate of mine who was a torpedoes man or sonar mate, I don't remember. But I was talking about the selenium about the day we got sick off of it. And somebody was like, well, yeah, look, see, Steve wasn't a nuke. He took care of the distilling plant. And I'm like, the distilling plant has steam. Steam controls reactor power because I'm trying to remember the potassium in the reactor chemistry, and I'm trying to look it up and I can't find it. There's a specific name for the chemical we use, and I'm just drawing a blank, and I don't know why. I don't know. I have to look it up again later. But it pisses me off when I can't remember something. It's been 30 years. But again, the whole reason why the nuke had to be on the distilling plant is one, it was in the M1 engine room, which is you have to be a nuke with a TLD, thermoluminescent dosimeter to go into the reactor plant. So to operate that distiller plant, you had to have thermoluminescent dosimetry. So you had to be a nuke. And 2, it affects steam, which you had to understand affected reactor power. So you had to be a nuke. So some people were out there going, "Oh, look, Steve just operated a reactor. Didn't operate a reactor. He operated a distilling unit." It's like, hello.
But that's where that's
it's so funny how they made that shit up.
Unit, the steam comes from the reactor,
right,
directly or indirectly.
And because if you take steam out of the system, you lower the temperature of the water, which becomes more dense. More dense water acts as a better moderator for neutrons. Make more neutrons become thermalized. More thermalized neutrons, more fissions, higher reactor power. There's a relationship here.
Yes, and you can.
And you know why
can
I know
get
that?
into
Because
a
I was a
bad
nuke.
situation.
I
Yes,
graduated
because
from nuke school.
Oh, sorry, I have to interrupt this.
Yeah.
I gotta go. The woman's
Alright.
giving me a disapproval face.
All right, no
Okay.
worries, man. All right, thanks for your
Alright.
input on your on the argument. I do appreciate it.
Oh, no problem.
Peace.
But yeah, that's a thing because if you if you lower the water temperature, water is going to be more dense. You're going to have more moderation, and that's going to affect your power, and you can get into really bad situations if you're.
Because you took
You know,
physics, and yet
yes.
these other people are just like, they didn't understand the relationship there, and so they thought I was lying about being a nuke. I'm like, God, you people are stupid. This is what I'm saying. They always take the worst possible interpretation of things because they're too stupid to understand what's really going on.
Yep.
And so I was just it didn't bother me, but it's like, are you serious? I just there's some rumors like floating around there, so I tweeted it out the other day. I was like, this is stupid.
Have you ever thought about what the because it's been 30 years, what things are like now? Reactor-wise?
Oh my God! Oh no, there's newer ships out there that are just state of the art, man. I thought we had what's called CIC, which is Command and was it the Command Systems Instrumentation? I whatever the freaking stood for. I only had to go in there twice for my ESWAS. But this is where everybody sits in the little rooms and looks at the radar screens, and identify friend or foe, all that shit, right? It's a nice air conditioned space. And those systems now, oh my God, I saw the inside of one of the newer ships. It's like apples and oranges. It's like Futurama, because my ship was built in the 60s.
And then the reactor
50s,
systems,
I'm sorry, 50s.
The reactor systems have evolved quite a bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's the newest aircraft was A6W, I think, is what they're up to, if I'm not mistaken, which aircraft carrier 6th generation by Westinghouse. What they've gotten basically is more efficient. You want to be able to get more bang for your buck. So uranium is very hard to mine, as you know. It's very hard to purify. So you want to be able to get the most power density you can in a reactor and the most life extension, because you don't want to redo recoring unless that's a huge process. My ship was, I think, we recorded once in its entire history. I think it was commissioned in 1964, if I'm not mistaken. But
aren't they doing something now where they have they do sort of partial recoring, where they cycle through the systems now rather than having to completely recore?
I couldn't tell you.
I'm speculating on that.
The core of my reactor was the size of a trash can. It wasn't very big. Yeah. It's very small. People don't realize reactors, the cores themselves, are not that big. It's the housing that's freaking huge.
Yeah.
So that's shielding and stuff.
Yeah.
But anyways, I just thought it was funny that people are like, "Oh, Steve wasn't a nuke; he was a boiler tech. He was a boiler tech, and he just repaired the distilling unit." I'm like, okay, sure.
A lot of what goes into managing a nuclear power plant is boilers. That's very sophisticated boilers.
That's all reactor is. Yes, it's a very sophisticated boiler that if you don't understand the physics behind it, can get very, very bad very, very quickly.
Yes.
You don't. Matter of fact, there's a button we had in onboard ship in one of the very few areas in the engine room that had air conditioning in it. That's where we kept all the electronics. Okay, and in that room, and by the way, this would have been classified 30 years ago, by the way. But my ship's no longer existent, so who cares? Yep. But in that room had all the control rod drive mechanism fuses. And basically they were round. And if you took one of those fuses out, the control rod drive mechanism would open up and the rod would come scramming down. So in theory, you could scram the reactor by taking rod, lowering, making the rods scram one by one. So all the electronics in there, because control rods are held up by magnetism.
Yeah.
Essentially, because you have a control rod drive mechanism that locks into place, and if there's no more electricity, it spring loads open. It causes
you want to fail in a safe mode rather than unsafe.
Right. So if there's no electricity, it'll fail in a safe mode because those clamps will open up. They're no longer there's no longer any magnetism overcoming the resistance from the springs. The springs shoot them open really quick, and the rod is shut down to the ground. And there's a button in there called what was the name of this button? Battle Short. That was the name of it. Battle Short. And again, I hope it shouldn't be classified right after 30 years. You would think,
Yeah.
but whatever. Who's going to sue me? But this battle short button had a specific purpose. What do you think the battle short button would do on a reactor that if you were in a war situation and you did not want that reactor to scram under any circumstances? It basically overrode all the shutdown mechanisms.
Wow.
The battle short set in conditions where that reactor would do everything possible to keep going. It would override every safety function, electronically speaking, and give it power as much as it needed to keep those control rod drives, engaged. And keep
you don't have that on a commercial power plant.
Well, you have it on a nuke ship, obviously, but
yes, but that's for a different reason.
Reason. But there's only one reason to ever use that button: an emergency, right? Emergency. Yeah. We never tested. There might have been testing on it. Obviously because you test everything, but there would be no other reason.
It probably was tested before the reactors were powered up.
Well, but yeah, but you want to make sure the button still works, right? So there's probably going to be, what's called preventive maintenance on it. But one time, when I recall, this may have been a rumor, I don't know, but for some reason I recall the ship captain wanting to run battle short during Leo ops, when we're doing operations with other like Australians and things of that nature, to make sure that we didn't lose. But I don't know if I don't know, maybe it was just a rumor, because I was like, that's a hell of a thing, because nobody in the right mind would ever push that button if there's an emergency, because you're looking at a full possible, partial reactor coolant loss. You're looking at a partial meltdown. If anything happens, you don't want to run that button, battle short. It's for emergency only. And so I thought that was kind of interesting that, yes, there was a button that overrode safety precautions on a nuclear reactor for an emergency. Yes.
That again, in a commercial power plant, just that existence of that capability could.
But those are not warship. We were a warship,
Yeah, but that makes sense.
Yeah, so we were a warship, and our primary mission was to protect the Carl Vincent. And so, in fact, I just looked it up. I just literally looked it up right now. It says battle short. Sometimes for battle short is a condition where some military equipment can be placed so it does not shut down when circumstances would be damaging to the equipment or personnel. The origin of the term is to bridge or short the fuses. Right? Remember I told you the control rod drive mechanisms?
Yeah.
Makes sense why it's in that particular space, right? Fuses an electrical apparatus before entering combat, so the fuse blowing would not stop the equipment from operating. Yes, we actually had that on my ship. And it's actually a Wikipedia on it. I did not know that. That's news to me.
So it shows that's not classified.
Yeah, right? But what does I know? I mean, people were like, because some idiots were like questioning my military experience. I'm like, who the fuck wants? Don't be stupid, dude. Don't. No. It's come on. You want to come after me with some shit? Fine, but you want to question my military experience? I've never given any reason to give anybody pause. Other people have. There's some YouTubers out there that I do question their military experience. Why? Because they're not. Because all of their experience cannot be true. There's contradictions there, And as somebody in the military, we know when people are putting out bullshit, and we're able to call people on their bullshit. But nobody's ever show any bullshit that I've ever said, because all my stories from the military actually did happen. I was there. I know. I didn't embellish on any of them. They're all verifiable through other people. But there are some people out the internet that has, claiming military experience that I just don't think they have. So.
Well, I'll just say it's good to talk to you.
Yeah, bud. Yeah, it's like an old fashioned.
Talking about logic stuff and other things. At some point, about one last thing I want to mention.
This is kind of like a rum and coke night, huh?
Yeah, kind of this, except it's not Friday, but I do have some wine.
No, I'm not drinking tonight.
Anyway, one of the things that has been interesting, you talked about the identity, possibly, and talk about the fact that X equals X is something that you can count on, or say as a fundamental axiom.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that's kind of interesting, because I've been talking to some of my logician friends about systems for which the identity does not hold, and the thing that came out was there's something called what's called a standard axiomatic set, and that is the set of axioms that are capable of describing real numbers.
Mm-hmm. Von Neumann ordinals, like a von Neumann ordinal.
Yeah, or with that,
or set theory.
So like that system one of the fundamental, postulates is a thing equals itself.
Yes.
But you can construct systems where you basically say that doesn't hold. And some of it comes from systems by which you could say that you could build a system where A equals B doesn't imply that B equals A.
Well, that's true, but that's more of a transitivity thing, is it not?
And you can also get a situation where objects are context sensitive. So, for example, in computers, there's the value called not a number.
Yeah, not n.
And explicitly, n does not equal itself. Right?
Well, what do you mean?
That not a number does not equal not a number. It's explicitly designed that way, so that it doesn't equal anything, including itself.
Okay.
And so again, that's an academic system. So it's possible to construct something, but those constructions are not.
Well, but hang on. Is that because of something? Is that because of a reflexive axiom problem? Because A equals A is reflexive, right?
Yeah.
But what it's saying still is that something is itself. I don't see how you'd have any system
so you can
which thing isn't
build a
itself.
system like that.
You can have a system where they're not reflexive, like in modal logic. There's certain possible world semantics using modal logic where you don't have like transitivity, you don't have reflexivity. But as far as like the actual entity being itself, I don't know how you could get away with that. That's just based on Leibniz indiscernibilities. Where those systems build is that all entities have context, and when you try to have a value equate to itself, you have two different contexts, and therefore it doesn't equal itself. Okay.
Right now, it turns out when you do that, you no longer have a standing axiom system, and you're not able to construct real numbers. A lot of stuff breaks. Right?
Yeah, I don't think you would never be able to devise any kind of real numbers or field even out of that.
But I say it's not useful.
Yeah, it's not useful.
It exists, and you can get. And so we actually was descended into this thing about when you violate that, or you explicitly put that as one of your fundamental axioms, that X does not equal X, and build a system out of it, you end up with really weird systems that are not very useful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the same thing with, I think pair-consistent logic has some usages, but as far as like applying them to most situations, it wouldn't do much good. But anyways, we do got to get going. Right. It's 12:30, longer than expected. This was fun. Thank you guys for hanging out. I appreciate Darkweb coming in. He made some very valid points. Even like I said, I'm not going to mention who he is, but it doesn't really matter. I'm cool. I don't want to dwell on the past.
Good. I'm glad you moved on.
If somebody can move on, I can move on. Most people. He wasn't somebody where it was a deal breaker. There are some people, obviously, they're deal breakers. He wasn't one of them. But it's a long history there. But I appreciate the fact that he actually read my paper and he actually was coming at it from actually interesting points of view. But that's why the information was objective. I mean, that's what I want other people to do. If you're going to attack my paper, coming at it in a way where I'm like, okay, there's something to this, rather than the petty crap that I see on Facebook where somebody says, oh, it's not valid or you're just wrong. That's not going to get my attention. The reason it gets my attention is because they make something that makes a point. So when people say that I eschew criticism or, blah, 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 it's like, no, you just haven't made a point that's convinced me of anything because you're not giving me an argument. At least this was an argument. And I did understand his point of view, and he's not wrong. It's just one of those things. Do you want to look at it from an internal or external critique? That's all.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you're going to try to assail the paper, doing it by logic is not going to be fruitful.
Yeah.
If you go after some semantic things, then you can have a discussion.
But even that doesn't really get you. And even if you
you just have a discussion.
I mean, my argument really is more: is it persuasive? Flu's argument was a persuasive argument. Well, to me, it wasn't persuasive. I mean, it was a type of argument that's called persuasive argument, right?
Yeah.
Was it persuasive? No, I think it failed miserably. But that's all it was. Do you accept it or not? My argument.
Semantics, you can have a discussion, right? But
right.
That's if you're going to focus on trying to say something about the paper. focus on semantics and have a discussion.
But I think a lot of
Be
people are
prepared to back up what you say, or at least to argue logically what you.
Yeah, when they start going into like my logic's off, I kind of tune
Yeah.
out a little bit unless they give me really because nobody's been able to show that's wrong, not even
Yeah.
close.
Yeah.
And if somebody
But,
says,
it's semantics that you can focus on,
But-
and the way you do that is you have a discussion.
but what do you do when you have somebody like Aaron Ra who blocks me when I told him that not B, not P is not a double negative, and he's like, "You're wrong," and I'm like, "Dude, I'm not wrong. What do you want me to do?"
Well,
And he's like,
that's not having a discussion.
"Yeah,"
right?
but I told him, I said, Aaron, if you can't show it, you don't know it, and that's when Aaron Ra blocked me, and it's like that's just disheartening because it's objective. It's not a matter of you accepting terminological usages. It's a matter of you're telling me something I know is fundamentally wrong on logic that you have no expertise in whatsoever. Not claiming that I do, but at least I've read more than I know. I've read more about logic than Aaron has.
But you're always
At a basic level.
These other people. The thing to focus on with the paper is have a discussion about the semantics, not the logic.
Yeah.
And have a discussion about the logistics, not the logic, and have a discussion. That's
Yeah.
and you may be able to get somewhere with a discussion.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I want people to talk about that stuff. And this is why when people say that I won't take criticism or I won't entertain people, look, I took this argument sight unseen, and even though I had my suspicions of who he was, I didn't want to ask him until the very end, and I did that for a very reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I was like, okay, I think I know who he is, but you know what? If he's going to come on and give me an argument, I'm going to allow this.
Good. All right.
You know.
Well,
so
thanks very much.
Yeah. And like I said, I'm grateful that actually somebody really did, for a change, try to come up with a good argument. Did it assail my paper? No, but it was far better than 10,000. You know, and this is somebody, like I said, I don't get along with, but it's still when somebody has work that's done that's reasonable, treat it as such. This is when people come after me because of my paper because they just don't like me. That's just silly at that point. You know? All right, bud. We'll catch you later. Thank you all for watching.
All right.
I'm gonna try to have a show on Friday on Non Sequitur if I can. I got stuff. Let me do. Guess who's coming on the 18th? Some ugly dude from Florida.
Oh, but he's not. You're not going to show his face, are you?
Oh God, no! I know it's terms of service things. But here's the thing: it's not even going to be really on flat. It's not going to be on flat Earth. His person that he's debating is not a flat earther. How's that for a tease?
Wow.
Right?
Not a flat earther. Is he one of those? Is he a person who's
spoilers
picked up on the center?
No, he's not a flat. He's not. It's not even remotely a flat Earth discussion. But it's just. Right. I'll tell you when I end stream. All right, guys. Thanks for watching this, and have a good night tonight. I got tomorrow off, and I'm going to probably do absolutely nothing.